Chapter 1734, An Over-God's Dwelling. The weakest point of the formation is not fixed. It'll move around as the formation operates, so all of you get ready and listen to me, said Fairy Hao Yu. Jian Chen, Shen Jian, Ando Fu, Mo Ling, and the deities all prepared themselves. They all stood in position, discreetly charging up power to launch their strongest attack at any time. Jian Chen and Shen Jian both radiated with powerful sword intent. Standing there, they seemed to have become two divine swords of shocking power. Sword intent permeated the region, contaminating the air and causing it to sharpen. Both of them understood that they were facing against a formation an over-god cast down. The formation was so powerful that even regular over-gods would struggle to break through it, let alone them, who were mere gods. As a result, they all needed to use their full strength this time. 3 meters left of the wall. Strike out now. Fairy Hao Yu called out coldly. With that, everyone launched their most powerful attacks simultaneously towards the location Fairy Hao Yu specified. There were 2 resplendent streaks of light among the attacks that illuminated the entire dwelling, completely outshining the light from Mo Ling and Ando Fu's attacks. Boom! The attacks from Jian Chen, Shen Jian, Ando Fu, Mo Ling, and the elders of both clans basically struck the place Fairy Hao Yu mentioned at the same time. With a huge boom, a powerful wave of energy splayed backwards, pushing the elders all into a constant retreat. They struggled to maintain a stable footing while facing the violent energy. The formation immediately began to shine. Jian Chen, Shen Jian, and the others were all fixated on the formation. However, to their disappointment, the formation stabilized after only shaking a few times after taking on their attacks. Your attacks are too weak. If this is all you have, you won't even be able to obtain what Duanmu's disciple has left behind, let alone reach where Duanmu cultivated, Fairy Hao Yu said with a frown. Try again but with battle skills. All deities stand in formation, said Jian Chen. All the deities of the Mo clan and the Ando clan stood in formation, while Mo Ling and Ando Fu prepared their battle skills. 3 inches to the left. Do it. Fairy Hao Yu called out. Daluo sword. Well, that splits the heavens, the sword shakes and stars shatter. Jian Chen and Shen Jian immediately struck out with their strongest sword technique. Mo Ling and Ando Fu also used their truth tier battle skills while the deities of both clans launched their most powerful attack together. Boom! The attack was clearly much more powerful than the previous one. The formation immediately began to shake as its light flickered rapidly. However, the formation remained undamaged after taking on the attacks from so many people. Fairy Hao Yu shook her head gently. She sighed, that's only equivalent to an attack from a peak god. It's still far from over god. The reason why the attack had reached the level of peak gods was mostly because of Jian Chen and Shen Jian. Even when using truth tier battle skills, the attacks of Mo Ling and Ando Fu could only reach mid-god at most. As for the deities, even when they poured their strength together through their formations, the effects were negligible. It was basically non-existent, and it was only slightly better than not being there at all. Come again. Jian Chen said coldly. With that, a terrifyingly powerful sword intent permeated the surroundings. A finger-sized strand of sword chi had appeared above Jian Chen's head. The eyes of both Mo Ling and Ando Fu narrowed as shock filled their faces. The appearance of the sword chi sent chills down their back. They felt like they had arrived in a cavern of ice, where even their hands and feet felt numb. It was terrifying. Just far too terrifying. When Mo Ling and Ando Fu sensed the sword chi that had appeared, they both could not help but feel a sliver of fear inside. Shen Jian's eyes had narrowed as well. He gazed at the tiny sword chi above Jian Chen's head. This was the second time he had seen Jian Chen use this sword chi, except it was far more powerful than the first time this time around. Let alone early gods, but even mid-gods would become stricken with fear before this sword chi. It could even claim the lives of late gods. The sword chi was simply too powerful. Fairy Hao Yu could not help but glance at Jian Chen. A smear of anticipation appeared in her eyes, and she said, right in the center. Attack now. Everyone launched their attacks again. They used their strongest battle skills and sword techniques while the profound sword chi hovering above Jian Chen shot out as a streak of white light as well. Boom! This time, the formation finally wavered. It began to shake violently as its light began to flicker. However, it was still not close enough to shatter it. Jian Chen's face turned cold at the sight of this. With a thought, another tiny strand of sword chi appeared over his head. It radiated with great power. The second strand of sword chi was even more powerful than the first. Swish! Before the formation had stabilized, the second strand of sword chi turned into a streak of resplendent light, striking the trembling formation with lightning speed. With a boom, the formation finally cracked after receiving Jian Chen's 2 strands of profound sword chi despite the fact that even regular gods would struggle to get past it. It had shattered. We're through. We're through. We're through the formation. Mo Ling and Ando Fu were both overjoyed. They were extremely excited. They had been yearning for this dwelling since long ago. They had come here many times with their ancestors in the past. It was nothing difficult with their ancestors' strength as over-gods to overcome this formation. It would just take a tremendous effort. However, as the ancestors were unwilling to spend the effort on a dwelling that did not interest them, the formation always remained. They devoted their efforts towards God King Duanmu's legacy instead. As a result, the dwelling that was extremely enticing to them had only been opened up today. The elders of the 2 clans became emotional as well. However, the greatest contributor, Jian Chen, had instead paled. He became haggard, and he seemed weak. He had expended far too much energy using the profound sword chi. He could endure using a single strand of profound sword chi at the great perfection of sword origin, but using them consecutively had sapped away all the power of his soul. Chapter 1735. The Pill Room. Even though Mo Ling and Ando Fu were extremely excited and burned with the desire to enter, they did not set foot into the dwelling. Instead, they both looked at Jian Chen. If Jian Chen did not dare to enter, the 2 of them would not be bold enough to enter either. Now that Jian Chen's strength had been gradually revealed, Ando Fu was not the only one who became extremely fearful of him. Even Mo Ling was unable to talk to him as casually as he did in the past. Jian Chen sucked in a deep breath. He endured the dizziness he felt as he carefully made his way into the dwelling. The over-god's dwelling was expansive and simple. There was a huge, round square. There were several buildings littered around the square, labeled with the Pill Room, Pill Refinery, Cultivation Room, Sword Comprehension Building and Scrolls Pavilion. Jian Chen and Shen Jian both looked towards the Sword Comprehension Building, while Mo Ling and Ando Fu looked between the Pill Room and the Scrolls Pavilion. As for Fairy Hao Yu, she only glanced past these places before losing interest. She did not believe that there would be the items that would assist her in rebuilding her body here. Shen Jian looked away from the Sword Comprehension Building very soon, directing his gaze towards the Pill Room. He said to Jian Chen, "Let's go into the Pill Room and have a look first." Sure, Jian Chen nodded before making his way over to the Pill Room with Shen Jian. Mo Ling, Ando Fu, and the other followed behind them closely. None of them moved by themselves. The Pill Room was also protected by formations, but it was nowhere near as powerful as the one at the entrance. It was only at the level of gods, forming a basic defense. It was obviously not enough to stop them, so they smashed through the formations with ease. The heavy fragrance of pills immediately surged up when they entered the Pill Room. The small room was filled with over 100 jade bottles. They were stored away neatly, creating quite a pleasing sight. Each bottle possessed a label for the pill it stored. Consolidation pills. It's a relatively common pill, with its greatest effect being consolidating your foundation. It has quite a good effect on people with unstable foundations. It can also replenish the vital energies of people slightly. Of course, if the condition is too severe, the pill will be useless. You'll need pills of higher grades, soul-clearing pills. It's a type of pill that stabilizes the soul and has an impressive effect on those with unstable souls. Apart from that, it can be ingested by people who are unable to restrain themselves and might end up suffering from qi deviation to lower the risk. Mo Ling and Ando Fu had both lived for a very long time, so they were obviously rather knowledgeable. They had seen most of the pills in the room, so they began to introduce them. These are renewal pills. There are actually renewal pills here. Suddenly, Mo Ling's face changed and immediately became filled with surprise and joy. He immediately grabbed a jade bottle and examined it carefully. He said excitedly, "These renewal pills have reached the 5th grade of the truth tier. Every single one of them is priceless. They can go for 1,000,000 low-grade divine crystals each, or even higher sometimes. They can only be bought in the royal city of the divine kingdom. You can't find them in the provinces." Ando Fu also rushed over and said excitedly, "They really are renewal pills. Renewal pills specialize in recovering origin energy. Every single one of them is priceless, but there's a reason why they're priceless, because they're extremely powerful. Even late gods can replenish all their expended origin energy within half a minute of consuming a renewal pill. At crucial times, renewal pills can save lives." What? Even late gods can replenish all their origin energy within half a minute? Jian Shen was also surprised when he heard of the effects. He immediately rushed over. Mo Ling immediately passed the jade bottle to Jian Shen. Jian Shen did not hold back, directly accepting it and opening its lid. He saw 10 pure white and perfectly round pills sitting in there. Each one was the size of a thumb. Jian Shen closed the bottle. Then he searched through the shelves and found that there were actually 6 bottles of the pills in total. Each bottle held 10 pills, resulting in 60 pills in total. In the end, they all came to an agreement for Jian Shen and Shen Jian to each take 2 bottles of the renewal pills each, while Mo Ling and Ando Fu each took 1. Originally, Mo Ling and Ando Fu had refused to take an entire bottle, only asking for 1 or 2 of the pills. After all, it was mainly because of Jian Shen that they could even make it in here. Mo Lin and Ando Fu even suspected that Jian Shen probably could smash through the formation by himself with his 2 strands of profound sword qi even without their help. However, Mo Ling and Ando Fu each took a single bottle in the end after Jian Shen's insistence. Ando Fu's feelings became extremely mixed as he held the bottle of pills. Originally, he believed that he was only Jian Shen's hostage. Even after coming into the God King's dwelling, he was only a tool to open a path. He would not have a share of whatever they found in here. However, he never expected Jian Shen to treat him just like Mo Ling, without any discrimination at all. He had even given him a whole bottle of the precious renewal pills without any hesitation. Revival pills. These are great for healing, having reached the 7th grade of the truth tier. A single pill can go for 1.5 million low-grade divine crystals in the royal city. There are actually 2 bottles here, fire cloud pills. These are pills that can temporarily strengthen of the person who ingests it. It can forcefully raise their cultivation by a minor level, ignoring the restrictions of the laws of the world. However, they'll suffer an extremely intense backlash as well and become greatly weakened. 1,000-year God origin pills. Each bottle has 10 pills, and there are actually 4 bottles here. Heavens, these are 10,000-year God origin pills. They're even more valuable than the renewal pills. Just the 10,000-year God origin pill in the royal city fetches for a price of 10 million low-grade divine crystals. Ando Fu's shocked voice rang out in Jian Shen's ears. Jian Shen beamed when he heard that there were 10,000-year God origin pills. He arrived before Ando Fu in flash and snatched the bottle from his hands. He opened its lid eagerly. There were also 10 pills inside. "Quick, help me have it. Look how many bottles of 10,000-year God origin pills there are," Jian Shen said eagerly. These pills were exactly what he needed. "Brother Jian Shen, there's another bottle here. It's also the last bottle. There are only 2 bottles in here." Mo Ling passed a jade bottle to Jian Shen. To no surprise, there were also 10,000-year God origin pills in there. 2 bottles. That's 20 pills. Jianchen clenched the 2 bottles. He felt extremely joyful as he ignored the intense dizziness in his head. 20 10,000-year God origin pills were equivalent to 200,000 years of cultivation. That could make his chaotic Niden much larger. Even though the 20 pills were not necessarily enough for his chaotic body to advance to the 10th layer, it was enough for him to get one step closer to the 10th layer. It could even allow him to reach the peak of the 9th layer. At that time, all he needed to do was consume a few heavenly resources or absorb a few divine crystals, and he would be able to reach the 10th layer successfully. He really is God King Duanmu's disciple after all. Just his pill room contains so many precious pills. His wealth has completely exceeded any other over-god. Mo Ling and Ando Fu sighed in amazement. The disciple of God King Duanmu was much wealthier than their ancestors. Soul recovery pills. These are pills that specialize in recovering the power of the soul. Jianshen, the power of your soul has been greatly consumed, so these pills should be useful to you. Shenjian walked over with a white jade bottle. Chapter 1736, Soul Recovery Pills. What? There are actually soul recovery pills? Before Jianshen could say anything, both Mo Ling and Ando Fu became astounded. They stared at the bottle in Shenjian's hand in shock. Jianshen's eyes lit up as well. He had expended a great deal of the power of his soul by using 2 strands of profound sword qi consecutively. He had to endure a sense of dizziness at all times. He was like an ordinary person who had not slept for several days, experiencing a horrible feeling. If the soul recovery pills could really recover the power of his soul, it would be extraordinary. Profound sword qi was Jianshen's greatest weapon right now, as well as his most powerful trump card to protect himself. However, he would basically drain all the power of his soul after using 2 strands of profound sword qi. Before the power of his soul had recovered, he had no more power to use another strand of profound sword qi. If the soul recovery pills could replenish the power of his soul quickly, it would drastically reduce the cooldown time for him to be able to use the profound sword qi again. I just wonder how effective the soul recovery pills are. If they can recover the power of my soul extremely quickly, they'll be of great use to me. They might even save my life, Jianshen thought. Jianshen accepted the jade bottle from Shenjian, and to no surprise, there were 10 pills in there. Jianshen poured one of the perfectly round pills in the center of his palm without any hesitation. He studied it while eagerness flashed through his eyes. They really are soul recovery pills. They really are. It's exactly the same as the records have specified. It can't be wrong with this unique smell. I never thought we'd find a treasure like soul recovery pills in here, Ando Fu said joyfully. Ancestor, you were too careless. This is nothing close to a regular over-god's dwelling. The things in here are so valuable that they completely exceed what regular late over-gods could possess. It even possesses pills that would be extremely beneficial to you. You shouldn't have given up on this dwelling in the past, Mo Ling said with regret and remorse. Jianshen became even more overjoyed after hearing the words of Mo Ling and Ando Fu. He studied the pill with much interest and murmured, "Looks like this soul recovery pill is pretty valuable." You don't understand, brother Jianshen. Soul recovery pills aren't just valuable. They're priceless because only great pill masters can refine this type of pill, and the resources that go into refining one are priceless. In a rural place like our divine kingdom of Pingtian, there aren't any of these pills for sale at all. And even if they do appear for sale, they can't be purchased with low-grade divine crystals. You'll need high-grade or even supreme-grade divine crystals, Mo Ling explained to Jianshen. Soul recovery pills really are impressive. They are one of the few pills that can recover the power of the soul and are even quite useful to god kings. A single pill is basically worth around 100,000 high-grade divine crystals. I've heard that the most expensive type can reach up to 500,000 high-grade divine crystals, added Fairy Hao Yu. What? A single pill is worth 100,000 high-grade divine crystals. It's that valuable? Jianchen and Shenjian both leapt in fright when they heard that. 100,000 high-grade divine crystals were equivalent to 10 million mid-grade divine crystals. Jianchen's hand trembled for a moment. The pill was just too valuable. Even with his mental fortitude, he struggled to remain calm. All the wealth he had taken from the Lu family and the Ando clan did not even amount to a single pill. Jianchen immediately gave up on the thought of ingesting one of the pills. He placed the pill back into its bottle without any hesitation. Eating a single soul recovery pill was equivalent to spending 10 billion mid-grade divine crystals, or a billion low-grade divine crystals. That was basically just wasting it. Thinking back to the past, he did not even have enough divine crystals to buy the flying snow sword in Maple Leaf City. Jianchen, I'd advise you to consume a pill immediately so that you can recover your peak condition as soon as possible. There must be quite a few people gathered outside. Who knows when they'll enter, suggested Fairy Hao Yu. That's right. Right now's not the time to act sparingly. We can't waste too much time, Shenjian said as well. Jianchen hesitated slightly after listening to the two of them. In the end, he made up his mind and consumed a pill. As soon as the soul recovery pill reached his stomach, Jianchen felt a cool presence rise up, directly into his soul. The power of his soul replenished rapidly, and in just a few seconds, he had recovered it all. At the same time, not all of the pill had been consumed after completely replenishing Jianchen's soul. It turned into a cool presence that was hidden within his soul. Once he consumed some of the power of his soul, it would be replenished immediately. What a wondrous pill, Jianchen could not help but sigh in amazement. A single soul recovery pill can even replenish all the power of an over-god soul. You'll need several or even several dozen for a god king, said Fairy Hao Yu. The power of Jianchen's soul had not reached over god yet, so a single pill was more than enough to replenish everything. However, as his strength increased, the power of his soul would grow as well. At that time, he would definitely use several of the pills if he wanted to recover the power of his soul completely. This was all because the amount of power a soul recovery pill could replenish was a set number. Afterwards, Jianchen gave Mo Ling and Ando Fu a single pill each, completely moving them. They were utterly ecstatic. Jianchen divided the remaining pills evenly between him and Shenjian. It's a fantastic pill, but it's a pity that there's only a single bottle, Jianchen sighed gently after putting the pills away. He felt slightly regretful. If only there were a few bottles more. Afterwards, Jianchen and the others found no other extraordinarily pills in the pill room. Most of them were just common types. In the end, they spent almost an hour to clear out all the bottles in the pill room. Aside from the 10,000-year god origin pills, Jianchen gave a portion of everything to Mo Ling and Ando Fu. Even the elders did not leave empty-handed. Jianchen, I will remember your kindness. If I get the chance, I will definitely return it, Ando Fu announced on the spot seriously. He had never seen such a great person in the world before. Under the situation where he was at a complete disadvantage in strength, Jianchen still split a lot of the precious pills with him despite Ando Fu technically being a hostage. If it was another person, Ando Fu was certain they would never give him any at all. They might have even killed him directly. Brother Jianchen is a true gentleman. It is my fortune to know someone like Brother Jianchen, Mo Ling sighed emotionally. If the Ando clan, Lu family, or Mo Ling found the pills instead, they would probably immediately begin fighting over the pills. This was because the pills were just too precious. Even ignoring the priceless soul recovery pills that could not even be found in the divine kingdom of Pingtian, just the 10,000-year god origin pills were valuable enough, not to mention the other valuable pills that were present as well. Jianchen's group walked out of the pill room before entering the pill refinery, cultivation room, and scrolls pavilion. There was only an ancient pill cauldron within the pill refinery. It was of quite a high quality, so Jianchen obviously took it with him. The cultivation room was completely empty, without anything at all. The scroll's pavilion only possessed a few cultivation methods and battle skills as well as the notes of the dwelling's owner in regards to cultivation. The notes came from a mere overgod. Jian Shen glanced through them casually before giving them to Mo Ling and Ando Fu. In regards to the cultivation methods and battle skills, Jian Shen let Mo Ling and Ando Fu pick one for themselves before taking the rest for himself. Although the cultivation methods and battle skills did not catch the eyes of Jian Shen and Shen Jian, they could be sold for quite a good price. In the end, Jian Shen's group entered the Sword Comprehension Building. Chapter 1737, The Sword Comprehension Building. The Sword Comprehension Building was actually a stone hut with 2 floors. The stone walls were extremely smooth and were like a polished mirror. They were flawless. However, Jian Shen and Shen Jian could tell with a single glance that a sharp and brutal sword intent had slowly ground flat all the walls. After the 2 of them entered the stone hut, they could not help but feel like they had entered a powerful sword. Soaring sword intent was present everywhere. This is at sword spirit. It's at sword spirit at the very least. Jian Shen's heart shivered when he sensed the sword intent that was present everywhere. He felt a suffocating pressure in the stone hut. It was the pressure that came from the laws of the sword. He had already reached the great perfection of sword origin, so the only way he could feel pressured by the laws of the sword was from the realm beyond that, sword spirit. Suddenly, Jian Shen's eyes narrowed. There was an extremely sharp sword chi on the face of one of the walls. He could not help but shudder when he saw the sword chi. He seemed to feel the sword chi shoot out directly towards him. Jian Shen felt like he was a tiny boat within a surging ocean before the sword chi, where he could be swallowed at any time. He felt as weak as an ant before the sword chi. Even though he had reached the great perfection of sword origin, he was still so weak. Jian Shen stood as still as a mountain. His calm eyes exploded brightly at that moment as if 2 streaks of light had shot out from his eyes, directly colliding with the sword intent that radiated his way. He was a swordsman himself, and he possessed an extremely great talent for the way of the sword. How could he be defeated by the sword intent? Even when he knew he was not its opponent, Jian Shen would never just sit around idly. He counterattacked fearlessly. Jian Shen seemed to hear a rumble in his sea of consciousness under his full-powered resistance. Vaguely, he seemed to feel like he had broken through some sort of shackles, emptying his entire mind and soul. He had entered a wondrous state. Dazed, he seemed to see a hazy image. Within the image, a person in green robes stood within the hut with his back to Jian Shen. He radiated with a supreme presence, which possessed sword intent that was so powerful that it even shocked Jian Shen. The man slowly raised the sword in his hand. Immediately, surging sword chi emerged from the sword. He stabbed out casually. The strike seemed to follow a trajectory of the ways of the world. It contained the wonders of the laws of the world. The single strike contained devastating power. Jian Shen felt the entire world clear up the moment the person stabbed out. The strike had completely filled his mind and soul, becoming the only thing in the world in his eyes. It absorbed his entire mind. He could even clearly sense all the minute changes in the strike. Jian Shen could not help but close his eyes in the stone hut. His mind had already sunk into the wonders of the strike uncontrollably, comprehending it closely. He was comprehending the sword. Shen Jian had also closed his eyes, entering a state where he was no longer aware of himself. He went through the same thing as Jian Shen. Fairy Hayu glanced at Jian Shen and Shen Jian. At the same time, she said to Mo Ling and Ando Fu through a communication technique, "You leave first. Don't disturb the 2 of them." Ando Fu and Mo Ling also glanced at the slash on the wall subconsciously. Unfortunately, they found nothing. Their eyes could not discern anything. The sword chi was clearly only for guiding people. It could not injure people, so only those who had also comprehended the laws of the sword could comprehend it. Mo Ling and Ando Fu did not walk the way of the sword, so the slash was obviously useless to them. Ando Fu and Mo Ling left the place silently. They planned to search through the final stone room. As they had no idea how long Jian Chen and Shen Jian would take, the elders of the two clans all went to the dwellings of God King Duanmu's grand disciples to not waste their precious time in here. There were the marks for comprehending laws in there, and they just happened to be able to benefit from it as deities. I hope you can break through in the laws of the sword. The path ahead will be even tougher, and the formations will be even more powerful. Even if I can find the weak points, you can't break through it with your current strength. Only by becoming stronger can you advance to where Duanmu cultivates, Fairy Haoyu murmured to herself as she stared at Jian Chen and Shen Jian, who had entered selfless states of comprehension. She could only wait now. The formations leading towards God King Duanmu's residence were even tougher. If the formations were not destroyed, she would not be able to enter either. Whether they could make it to the depths would completely depend on Jian Chen and Shen Jian. Suddenly, Fairy Haoyu's eyes narrowed. She suddenly turned her head towards the entrance of the dwelling. The space there actually rippled slightly. Fairy Haoyu frowned and said grimly, "Looks like the people outside will enter very soon." There's not much time left. Currently, a deafening boom had echoed outside God King Duanmu's dwelling. Several dozen overgods stood in a group as they destroyed formations around the entrance. Each formation was extremely powerful. They were enough to deal with or even kill overgods, so the destruction of several dozen of these formations created an astounding disturbance. It actually made the space there distort. Now, the number of overgods that had gathered before the entrance had increased to over 50, while the divine kingdoms that took part had increased from the initial 4 to 7. At the very front of them stood a sagely old man with gray hair. He held a formation disc that bore the 8 trigrams as he stared at the exploding formations. The overgods gathered there all treated the old man politely. They all behaved very modestly. This was because the old man was a famed formation master they had invited. Not only was he prestigious, but he was powerful as well, having reached late overgod. He was known as Master Chanlong. It was also this Master Chanlong who came up with the idea of casting down several powerful formations around the entrance of God King Duanmu's dwelling before exploding them. It formed a powerful attack that barraged the space there in an attempt to force out the entrance hidden. Just a little more. Do it again. This time, the entrance to the dwelling will definitely appear, Master Chanlong said leisurely while hovering in the air. Under the personal lead of Master Chanlong, the overgods who had studied some formations before all began to cast down the formations. A few days later, Master Chanlong had finally finished casting down all the formations with the efforts of several dozen overgods. This time, there were over 100 formations, and every single one of them was at the level of overgods. Several thousand meters from there, the young man with a fan lay comfortably on a lounge. His eyes were closed as if he was sleeping. 2 beauties bent over beside him, carefully massaging his shoulders and legs. They worked extremely diligently. The 2 women were not weak. They were both deities. Let alone the Dong'an province, deities were even powerful existences in the entire divine kingdom of Pingtian, yet they could only afford to massage a young man who was only a god. Even overgods could not enjoy something like this because even in clans with overgods, deities possessed extraordinary statuses. They could never be used like servants. However, the 2 girls showed no unhappiness or reluctance at all. Instead, both of them were extremely joyful, as if massaging the young man was something they enjoyed very much. At this moment, the young man who seemed to be sleeping opened his eyes. He yawned lazily and glanced ahead sleepily. He said rather unhappily, "Why have they still not opened the dwelling up? Uncle Qin, how long have I been cultivating for?" "Young master, you've already been cultivating for 5 years, the burly man behind the young man replied. Chapter 1738, The entrance appears. The young man sat up slowly. He spread his fingers and opened the fan in his hands with a thwop. He gently fanned himself as he gazed at the several dozen overgods who had cast down formations under Master Chanlong's instructions. Interest immediately flooded his eyes again, and he said, "Uncle Qin, do you think they can force out the entrance this time?" The burly man shook his head gently. "Although it's not a bad idea, it's still a little too little to force out the entrance hidden in space. Duanmu comprehended the laws of the sword and the laws of space. He had basically reached the limits of God King with them, so it'll be difficult for these over-gods to force out the entrance he hid. The young man stood up from the lounge lazily. He stretched a little before glancing at the two beautiful deities standing obediently to one side. He could not help but smile indifferently, and with a flip of his hand, a jade bottle appeared in his hand. The burly man glared at the young man when he saw the jade bottle, and the muscles on his face twitched unnaturally. The young man poured out 2 pills from the bottle, and the pills floated slowly towards the 2 women under an invisible force. The 2 women both looked at the pills excitedly. I am a man of my word. Since you've served me for 5 years, I would never mistreat you. Here are 2 10,000-year god origin pills, 1 each, the young man said indifferently. He was extremely lavish. There was only a single 10,000-year god origin pill in the entire divine kingdom of Pingtian, and it had been brought over from another divine kingdom by the divine king. It was so expensive that it still had not been sold. Even though there were extremely great disadvantages to consuming 10,000-year god origin pills, there was a second reason why the pill had not been sold, which was its price. Thank you, young master. Thank you. The 2 women thanked him. They were in especially good spirits. They carefully put the pill away like a treasure. All right, you 2 can go. Go do whatever you have to do. I'll let you go early, the young man said as he fluttered his fan. The 2 women thanked him again and no longer remained. They left happily. They had used just 5 years to obtain a precious 10,000-year god origin pill. It was just too worth it of a deal for them. They felt like the pills had basically fallen into their laps. Young master, how come I don't remember when you obtained the 10,000-year god origin pills? And with your talent, the clan would never give you pills like that. Have you secretly snuck into Elder Gu's pill room? Uncle Chin asked after the 2 women had left. The young man closed his fan in a single moment and glanced at Uncle Chin with guilt. He said, of course not. Uncle Chin, you're thinking too much. Not to mention that even you would struggle to enter Elder Gu's pill room, so how would I get in there, right? Then where did your 10,000-year god origin pills come from? All right. Uncle Chin, let's not talk about the pills anymore. Aren't they just 10,000-year god origin pills? With my status, getting them is a piece of cake, the young man cut off Uncle Chin. Then he looked away and stared at the entrance to God King Duanmu's dwelling. He said, even with so many people, they've still failed to make the entrance appear after 5 years. I don't have that much time to wait for them. Uncle Chin, go help them out. If they continue like this, they'll just be wasting my time. Uncle Chin glanced at the young man rather helplessly and nodded slightly. Blow up the formations. It was also at this moment that Master Chanlong's voice rang out. Soon, a series of thunderous booms followed. The formations cast down around the entrance had all been blown up, forming a powerful attack that ripped at the space there. The space immediately trembled gently. However, it was still a little lacking for the terrifying attack from the explosion of so many over-god-level formations to rip open the space there. It was also in the moment that the formations had been blown up that the Uncle Chin beside the young man moved. He only extended a finger towards the entrance gently. His action immediately created a series of ripples in the space before him silently. His movement seemed extremely ordinary, just like a mortal casually raising a finger. However, it managed to move the space there. However, everyone's attention was gathered on the dwelling at that time. No one had noticed Uncle Chin's actions. It was also with Uncle Chin's movement that the space around the entrance to the dwelling shook violently. Space seemed to rip open there, revealing a stone door hidden in space. The powerful attack from the explosion of several dozen formations struck the stone door and failed to move it at all. The entrance has appeared. It's the entrance to God King Duanmu's dwelling. Master Chanlong really is a master of formations after all. You really are impressive to have actually forced out the entrance of the dwelling. Master Chanlong, you have my admiration. The over-gods nearby all praised Master Chanlong. Meanwhile, Master Chanlong smiled deeply with the 8 trigrams disc in one hand as he stroked his white beard with the other. His face was filled with confidence. The young man also smiled deeply when he saw this from afar. There's another powerful formation on the stone door. Master Chanlong, please assist us in getting through it. Master Chanlong, we'll all be depending on you. The surrounding over-gods all asked Master Chanlong to continue breaking through the formations. They spoke even more politely than before. As long as the entrance has appeared, the formations will be much easier to deal with. Any formation cannot lose its source of energy. As long as you drain its source of energy, any formation will fall apart by itself no matter how powerful it is. Allow me to find the weakness of this formation, Master Chanlong said loudly. He arrived before the stone door with his chest held high as he stared at the door with much focus. The moment the entrance to the dwelling appeared, the space within the dwelling trembled gently as if it had received a powerful attack. Fairy Hayu gazed in the direction of the entrance from outside the Sword Comprehension building. She became grim and murmured, the remaining time is only decreasing. Chapter 1739, Sword Spirit. In the blink of an eye, another half a month had passed. A gleam of light suddenly flashed through the eyes of Master Chanlong, who had been devoting himself to studying the formation outside God King Duanmu's dwelling. He said, right here. Everyone attack here with your full strength. Without any hesitation, the several dozen over-gods all struck out at the point of weakness specified by Master Chanlong. Even though it was a weak point, the formation was still one God King Duanmu personally cast down after all. Smashing through it as over-gods was not an easy feat. The several dozen over-gods barraged the point of weakness crazily for 10 days and nights straight. Only then was the formation destroyed. However, the stone gate remained closed. The light of formations continued to flicker outside. There was more than a single formation there. There are a total of 18 formations on this stone door. There's 17 left, so allow me to study and try to predict the features of this second formation. Master Chanlong swung his sleeves and continued to study the formation by squatting before it. This person is quite accomplished with formations. If this continues, the formations cast down by Duanmu will be destroyed sooner or later, Uncle Qin said calmly from afar. A year later, 8 of the 18 formations had been destroyed. Only 10 remained, blocking everyone from entering. At the same time, Shenjian awakened from his state of comprehension within God King Duanmu's dwelling. With the period of comprehension, his way of the sword had reached the great perfection of sword origin. On the other hand, Jian Chen remained in his state of comprehension and had not roused. Shenjian did not disturb Jian Chen. He walked out of the stone hut silently. The longer a person spent comprehending, the more they would benefit. Jian Chen's way of the sword had already reached the great perfection of sword origin before him. He had been comprehending for longer as well, so coupled with Jian Chen's talent, Shenjian realized that Jian Chen was probably making a breakthrough with the way of the sword. Afterwards, Shenjian sat down outside the building. Then he placed the Cloud Stream sword on his knees and formed seals with his hands. He began to cultivate again. Without much delay, a mysterious power began to radiate from him. In the end, it gradually turned into translucent specks of light, flickering as they revolved around him. The glimmering specks of light seemed to form a star chart of the night sky. Shenjian was a huge giant who currently sat within a galaxy. His cultivation had reached the level of gods, so he had fulfilled the conditions required to grasp the second move of a will that splits the heavens. Although he had used the move in the battle against the evil spirit once in the past, he had paid a huge price to forcefully use it. Not only was its power reduced, but it did not possess the core essence of the move. He was nowhere near grasping the essence of the move back then. As a result, he needed to carefully comprehend the second move after becoming a god. This battle skill is of quite a high grade. Looks like Shenjian has also inherited the legacy of someone great, or it would be impossible for him to learn such a high-grade battle skill. At the same time, his sword is nowhere near as simple as it seems. Fairy Haoyu stared at Shen Jian from the distance and the light in her eyes flickered. Just like this, another half a year passed. Suddenly, a powerful sword intent appeared within the sword comprehension building. Sword Qi currently revolved around Jian Chen, who stood inside the stone hut. The sword Qi were finger-sized and silver-white, swimming around happily like little fishies. Compared to the sword Qi Jian Chen previously used, this sword Qi was no longer as rigid. Instead, it seemed more intelligent, as if each strand of sword Qi possessed its own life. Jian Chen had finally made a breakthrough in his way of the sword after this period of comprehension, formally advancing to sword spirit. That's the comprehension of an over-god's laws of the world. Gleams of light flickered through Fairy Haoyu's eyes when she sensed the disturbance in the building. She was quite surprised. Jian Chen's comprehension of the laws of the world had already become equivalent to an over-god's now. Jian Chen's affinity for comprehension even makes me a little jealous, Fairy Haoyu said rather emotionally. Jian Chen was still a cultivator at sainthood when she first met him on the Tian Yuan continent. He had not even comprehended the laws of the world back then. Only so much time had passed since then, yet he had made his way up, step by step, to an expert that was equivalent to an over-god now. The only aspect he lacked in was his personal cultivation. It was too low. The 9th layer of the chaotic body was only equivalent to a deity. Even with the entire saint's world in perspective, there was probably only Jian Chen who possessed the cultivation of a deity and the comprehension of an over-god. This was because it was just too difficult for his chaotic body to progress to a new layer. He required tremendous amounts of cultivation resources. The sword Qi in Jian Chen's surroundings settled down very soon. However, he did not make his way out of the building. Instead, he directly went to the 2nd floor. The 2nd floor was extremely spacious as well. There was a stone table in the center with a scroll on it. Jian Chen arrived before the stone table and looked around carefully. Only after confirming that there were no dangers did he pick up the scroll and slowly unfurl it. Jian Chen's eyes suddenly narrowed the moment he unfurled the scroll. He felt like the scroll was enlarging right before his eyes, becoming boundless in the blink of an eye. It had transformed into a world with mountains and rivers, while he himself stood in a world like that. A green-robed, middle-aged man had appeared silently before him. The middle-aged man stood tall and straight. His appearance was dashing. He possessed sharp eyebrows that were as straight as swords and eyes that shone like stars. He radiated with surging sword intent. The sword intent was so powerful that even Jian Chen, who had reached sword spirit, felt greatly pressured. God King Duanmu. Jian Chen shuddered. Even though he had never seen the man before him before, he was extremely certain that the man was the owner of the dwelling, the supreme God King Duanmu. However, this was not God King Duanmu's true body. It was just an image he had left behind. God King Duanmu probably used this scroll to teach his disciple, thought Jian Chen. At this moment, God King Duanmu began to use the sword in the empty space. His style of the sword was swift and brutal. Every single strike contained sharp sword qi. All the attacks were extremely terrifying. Whenever he stabbed out, the sword seemed to follow the natural trajectories of the world. It seemed to have fused with the world, possessing the power of laws. This was a scroll God King Duanmu left behind to pass on his ways. He had engraved all his comprehension of the laws of the sword into the scroll, passing it on selflessly. The person he wanted to pass it to was not Jian Chen but his disciple. It was just that Jian Chen had touched the disciple today, so he was brought into this illusionary world instead. Naturally, he was treated as God King Duanmu's disciple. After all, the scroll was only a scroll. It did not possess any consciousness. It was naturally unable to tell who was who. Jian Chen remained in the illusionary world as he devoted all his attention to God King Duanmu's sword techniques. It seemed like his mind had sunken into it as he closely comprehended every single detail of God King Duanmu's usage of the laws of the sword. God King Duanmu's sword style doesn't only contain the way of the sword, but the laws of space as well. Jian Chen realized something and became filled with admiration. Not only were God King Duanmu's accomplishments in the laws of the sword impressive, but his laws of space had reached an extremely profound level as well. Chapter 1740, A Tight Situation. Originally, I comprehended the laws of space as well, but they were ripped away from me by the sword spirits so that I could focus on the way of the sword. If I comprehended other ways while comprehending the way of the sword, it'll just waste my time and effort. It'll indefinitely delay when I can reach the highest realm of the way of the sword, Jian Chen thought. He agreed to what the sword spirits had done very much. He really would be able to reach the highest realm of the way of the sword by devoting all his time to it. If he had to comprehend other ways while comprehending the way of the sword, it would waste quite a lot of time. Although a few supreme experts in both the saints' world and the immortals' world had grasped more than a single way, most of them would comprehend their first way to the absolute limit and reach the apex of the world first. After that, they would start comprehending other ways. Even if any accidents happened to them, they would be able to protect themselves. If a person began comprehending several ways right from the start, they would have to spend quite a lot of time and energy on each way. No matter how great their talent was, they would have to spend quite a long time before they managed to reach the apex. It was extremely likely for them to die during that time due to various reasons. There were quite a few prodigies who died before achieving great strength in both the immortals' world and the saints' world. I don't know the laws of space anymore, so I'll ignore God King Duanmu's laws of space. I'll just comprehend his way of the sword. Jian Chen cleared his mind and began paying close attention. Jian Chen completely lost his sense of time. When God King Duanmu finally stopped using the sword, his figure faded gradually and vanished in just a few seconds. Jian Chen's mind also receded from the scroll. The scroll in his hand had closed up automatically. At the same time, he discovered that Shen Jian had arrived beside him at a certain time. This scroll will be of great use to us. You have a look. I need to go into seclusion immediately. Jian Chen passed the scroll to Shen Jian before leaving the building to go to the cultivation room. Shen Jian's mind was also sucked into the scroll's world when he opened it like Jian Chen. He experienced the same thing. In the blink of an eye, another month passed. Jian Chen finally emerged, and when he did, he had completely digested all his comprehension from God King Duanmu's usage of the sword, which deepened his comprehension of the way of the sword some more. Even though he still remained at the minor achievement of sword spirit, he had taken a great step towards partial achievement without a doubt, and he was now closer than before. Shen Jian benefited greatly from the scroll as well. Although he remained at the great perfection of sword origin, he was even closer to sword spirit now. Of course, they could comprehend so much from the scroll God King Duanmu left behind completely because of their talent and aptitude for comprehension. The better they were at comprehending, the more they would benefit obviously. If a person with no special aptitude had obtained God King Duanmu's scroll instead, they would not benefit at all even if they glanced through it 1,000 times. Even if the most basic method of passing on ways was present before a person with bad aptitude, they would not be able to benefit from it at all. As soon as they emerged from the cultivation room, Jian Chen frowned. He looked towards the entrance of the dwelling. That was where they had come in from, and it actually rumbled from that direction. You've sensed it as well. It's the people outside attacking the entrance. They'll enter before long. Fairy Hao Yu arrived before Jian Chen and said sternly. Jian Chen became stern as well. Although his strength had increased drastically after reaching sword spirit, he also understood that the people gathered outside would be a large group of overgods. Jian Chen was able to achieve invincibility among those below overgod with his current strength, but he still stood no chance of victory against overgods. This was because all overgods had comprehended the same amount of the laws of the world as him at the very least. There were even a few overgods who had comprehended more than him. Jian Chen possessed no advantage in the laws of the world before overgods. His personal cultivation was a huge disadvantage in the first place, so as soon as they began fighting, he would definitely suffer defeat. A thought flashed through Jian Chen's mind. Suddenly, he gritted his teeth, and with a flip of his hand, 2 jade bottles appeared from his space ring. They were labeled 10,000-year God origin pills. I can only consume these pills in the current situation. It's a pity that I only have 20 of these pills. I wonder if 20 will be enough for me to reach the 10th layer of the chaotic body, Jian Shen said gruffly. He could only consume the pills sooner than he had initially planned now that he faced the threat of so many overgods. Only when he was even stronger could he protect himself before these overgods. Jian Shen turned around and entered the cultivation room again to continue his seclusion. However, he did not comprehend the way of the sword this time. Instead, he ingested the pills to increase his personal strength. Jian Shen sat in the gloomy room. He poured out a pill from the bottle and swallowed it without any hesitation. As soon as the pill reached his stomach, it turned into an extremely violent energy that exploded within Jian Shen. Jian Shen did not feel like he had consumed a pill but a bomb. The energy was so violent that if weaker people with more fragile bodies had consumed it instead, they probably would have been blown into pieces in an instant. However, Jian Shen cultivated the chaotic body. Even if the effects of the pill were several times more brutal, he could still withstand it, as the toughness of the cultivator's body was one of the greatest advantages of the chaotic body. Jian Shen directly ignored any future problems the pills could cause and devoured all 20 pills one by one. They wreaked havoc in his body as violent energy that was gradually refined into chaotic force. The chaotic Niden in his dantian grew bit by bit as well. Mo Ling, Ando Fu, and the elders of both clans all gathered outside the cultivation room. Every single one of them was worried. The disturbances from the entrance were only increasing, where even they could sense it with their strength. All of them became uneasy. After all, they were the people who had entered the dwelling first. Once the overgods made it in here, they would definitely suspect that their group had obtained a lot of good things, so the overgods would never let them go. A month later, Jian Shen consumed all 20 10,000-year God origin pills. However, to his disappointment, they failed to allow him to break through to the 10th layer. Chapter 1741, Skeletons of Overgods. Jian Shen left the cultivation room with a heavy heart. The amount of energy he required to go from the 9th layer to the 10th layer of the chaotic body was just too extravagant. 20 10,000-year God origin pills were not enough. He estimated that he would require 80 of the pills at the very least. Although he still had a few of the heavenly resources he had found in the Xianhuang microcosm on him, he would not be able to reach the 10th layer even if he ingested all of them, as the remaining gap to the 10th layer was just too vast. He could not ingest too many of the heavenly resources, as his body would develop resistance, and their effects would be greatly reduced. If he was close to the 10th layer, he could consider ingesting them. Xinjian, Ando Fu, Mo Ling, and the elders of the two clans had all gathered there already when Jian Shen emerged from the room. The growing disturbances at the entrance of the dwelling had alarmed all of them. They were all extremely grim. The people outside will be entering very soon. We must proceed further into the dwelling, Xinjian said grimly. God King Duanmu's dwelling was very large, but there was nowhere for people to hide. Once the people outside made their way in, they would definitely inspect every inch of the dwelling. Their group would not be able to hide from overgods. Brother Jian Shen, we've collected everything in the stone room, whether they're useful or not. We've put them all away into a space ring. Aside from that, there are a few divine crystals in the room. They're all high grade. Mo Ling handed a space ring to Jian Shen. Jian Shen checked through the space ring and found that it was filled with various random things. Most of them did not have any functional purpose at all and was just decor that was pleasant to the eye. There were even gold and silver coins that only possessed value to people of the secular world. Naturally, Jian Shen had no interest in those things, so after checking through it all quickly, he found the divine crystals Mo Ling had mentioned. There were not many divine crystals, only 3 pieces. However, each piece was frighteningly large, even stunning Jian Shen. The standard size for a divine crystal was thumb-sized, 1 centimeter long, high, and wide. However, the 3 divine crystals were all 1 meter cubes. Jian Shen took out a divine crystal. He could not help but sigh in amazement as he stared at this large piece. The largest high-grade divine crystal he had seen before was only the size of a head, yet the divine crystals before him had already exceeded that by several dozen times. This is a block of divine crystals. A block of divine crystals is 1 meter in length, width, and depth. If you break it up, a block of divine crystals is worth 1,000,000 of the standard divine crystals. Some deals involving large sums often use divine crystals like this. Fairy Hao Yu's voice rang out. Mo Ling, Ando Fu, and the elders all looked at the block of divine crystals enviously. To them, just high-grade divine crystals were rather rare, let alone a piece so large. However, they understood that even though they coveted the divine crystal, they could only look and not touch it. It would not end up with them in the end. With our current level of cultivation, using high-grade divine crystals to cultivate is just too wasteful. I feel like we should wait till we get out and exchange all these high-grade divine crystals for mid-grade divine crystals. It'll be more beneficial for our cultivation, said Shenjian. High-grade divine crystals were commonly used by over-gods. Mid-grade divine crystals were more than enough for them, who were gods. Low-grade divine crystals were basically used by people below God. Their effects would become negligible to gods. Shenjian had consumed quite a number of low-grade divine crystals to become a god in the past. Even if all 3 blocks of high-grade divine crystals were given to him now, he would not be able to reach mid-god. As a result, it was better for them to keep the divine crystals and exchange them for mid-grade ones once they got out of here. A block of high-grade divine crystal was equivalent to 1,000,000 standard high-grade divine crystals. If they were exchanged for mid-grade divine crystals, a single block of high-grade divine crystals would be worth 100,000,000 mid-grade divine crystals. On the other hand, 100,000,000 mid-grade divine crystals were enough for Shenjian to become a mid-god. Since our strength won't increase even if we use up these 3 blocks of divine crystals, why not let them be for now? We can exchange them after we get out. Jian Chen nodded and placed the blocks of divine crystal back into the space ring. Bang! At this moment, a heavy sound rang out from the entrance. The sound was even more intense than before, and the space at the entrance twisted violently as well. Looks like the people outside have smashed through another formation. We can't waste any more time. Let's leave immediately for the depths, Fairy Hao Yu said grimly. The current situation was becoming more and more pressing. Everyone no longer hesitated and immediately set off. They advanced towards the very depths. That was where God King Duanmu cultivated. The formations became more and more powerful as they made their way towards where God King Duanmu cultivated. They had even gradually exceeded the level of Over-God and reached God King. Even though the 3 Over-Gods had destroyed the formations they came across along the way, the residual fragments still radiated with terrifying power, causing their hearts to beat constantly as they moved through. They were filled with anxiety as their vigilance had been raised to the absolute maximum. Very soon, Jian Chen discovered 3 skeletons ahead. They were covered by a thin layer of dust, and it was clear that they had been dead for many years already. Ancestor. Mo Ling and Ando Fu could not help but quiver violently at the sight of the 3 skeletons. Both of them dropped to their knees as sorrow filled their faces. After so many years, this was the first time they had seen the remains of their ancestors. Although they had entered the dwelling in the past, they had not dared to venture too far in due to their limited strength. Jian Chen also saw the 3 skeletons, and his feelings became mixed. After all, they had been 3 Over-Gods in the past. They had expended tremendous effort to obtain God King Duanmu's jade, the key to God King Duanmu's dwelling, but in the end, they failed to benefit from it at all and died in the dwelling instead. That's a hidden killing formation. The 3 of them entered it accidentally, so they were slain. Let's make our way around it, said Fairy Hao Yu. She was at the very front of the group, guiding everyone through. Mo Ling and Ando Fu endured their sadness and bowed towards the remains from afar. Afterwards, they made their way around the place behind Jian Chen. They both knew that their ancestors' skeletons had been trapped in the killing formation. They were unable to take the skeletons away, or even approach the place. After advancing a few hundred meters, everyone stopped once again. A formation blocked their way. This formation is extremely powerful. I don't know whether you can get through it. I'll find the weakness of the formation and all of you try attacking it with your full strength, said Fairy Haoyu. She stared at the formation and studied it for a while before she suddenly extended her right hand, 3 inches to the southeast. Attack. Chapter 1742, A gathering of over-gods. Along with Fairy Haoyu's voice, Jian Chen and everyone else struck out with their full strength at the same time. The deities all stood in formation as they launched their most powerful attack. Ando Fu and Mo Ling forced out all the power they had, using their most powerful battle skills to attack the weakness of the formation. Stars glimmered around Shenjian. As he stabbed out as hard as he could with the Cloud Stream sword, a galaxy filled with shining stars appeared. A pure and powerful force surged out from the galaxy, embedded onto the Cloud Stream sword. It shot out as a powerful strand of sword chi. Shenjian had used the second move of a will that splits the heavens that he had recently comprehended without any hesitation. The sword extends and galaxies extinguish. This time, it was clearly much more powerful than when he used it against the evil spirit. Even late gods would be doomed before his attack unless they were prodigies as well. 2 finger-sized, silver-white sword chi appeared above Jian Chen's head, and they surged with sword intent. With a thought, the 2 strands of profound sword chi shot out at the same time. They moved extremely fast as if they had exceeded the speed of lightning, striking the weak point Fairy Haoyu had specified in a single instance. Everyone had basically launched their most powerful attacks at the same time. With a great boom, the terrifying shockwave of energy forced back Mo Ling, Ando Fu, and the elders. In particular, all the elders spurted blood from their mouths as they paled. As Jian Chen had used 2 strands of profound sword chi at the same time, the attack had reached the level of overgods. Just the shockwaves of energy had heavily wounded the deity elders, and it even forced Mo Ling and Ando Fu to constantly retreat. When the violent energies gradually dispersed, everyone's faces became extraordinarily ugly. They had used their most powerful attacks without holding back at all, and this even included their greatest trump cards. However, the formation remained intact. Sigh. Looks like this is our limit. Fairy Haoyu sighed gently when she saw this. She was filled with frustration. Jian Chen became rather dejected as well. The formations in the path to God King Duanmu's cultivation area was unimaginably powerful. Even after growing stronger in the dwelling, he was still far from being able to smash through the formations there. Boom! At this moment, the entire dwelling basically rumbled. Violent streams of energy appeared in the distance, causing all their faces to become extremely ugly again. Including Jian Chen, everyone felt an intense pressure from the ripples of energy. Even late gods would probably fall before the shockwave. After all, this shockwave came from the attacks of several dozen overgods. It was so powerful that even overgods would have to avoid it. Afterwards, dense origin energy surged into the dwelling rapidly. The environment within the dwelling became the same as the outside world, and it was now filled with dense origin energy. The entrance has been smashed through, Jian Chen said with much grimness. With a flick of his hand, a jade bottle appeared in his hand. He directly poured out a soul recovery pill from the bottle and ingested it, ignoring how reluctant he was to use it. He recovered his consumed power of the soul. He would be facing many overgods soon, so he had to return to his peak condition. Enter the Bright Moon Divine Hall, Fairy Haoyu said grimly. Afterwards, her illusionary figure suddenly disappeared, having entered the Divine Hall. She controlled the Divine Hall to fly out of Jian Chen's space ring, falling onto the ground as a grand hall. The Divine Hall's entrance was wide open. If you don't want to die, come in. Remember, everyone must seal up their cultivation inside my Divine Hall. Fairy Haoyu's voice rang out from the Divine Hall. Mo Ling, Ando Fu, and the elders all understood that the Bright Moon Divine Hall was fragile. None of them had any objections, and they sealed off their cultivations and erased their presences before entering the divine hall quickly. Shenjian, you should go in as well. The people coming in are all overgods, Jian said when he saw Shenjian hesitate. Shenjian was an early god, while his comprehension of the way of the sword had reached late god. He was still extremely far off when compared to overgods. Shenjian clearly understood this. After a moment of hesitation, he told Jian to be careful before entering the divine hall as well. Once everyone entered the structure, the bright moon divine hall shrank rapidly before returning to Jian space ring. In the blink of an eye, only Jian remained within God King Duanmu's dwelling. The dwelling was very large, but there were no places to hide. It was impossible for them to escape from the overgod searches. As a result, Jian did not hide. Instead, he sat down where he was and waited for the people to come in. The power of his soul that he had drained from using the 2 strands of profound sword chi rapidly recovered under the assistance of the soul recovery pill. A few seconds later, tremendous presences appeared at the entrance of the dwelling. The overgods outside had all entered the dwelling. Several dozen powerful senses of the soul swept through the dwelling recklessly before all gathering on Jian. There's actually someone inside? I heard that people entered the dwelling several years ago. Is he it? A few voices of surprise and doubt rang out from the entrance. The overgods gathered at the entrance all flew towards Jian. Overgods moved extremely fast, so in just a few seconds, they all appeared in Jian's view. They all gave off powerful presences that were as tremendous as the ocean. At the forefront of the group was a sagely old man. He held a disc with the 8 trigrams. He was Master Chanlong. Jian slowly opened his eyes as well and stood up. After the period of recovery, the power of his soul had completely returned. He slowly glanced past the overgods gathered there and said indifferently, I never thought there'd be over 60 overgods. That has surprised me. I never thought that God King Duanmu's dwelling would be so attractive. Jian was very mentally pressured, as he had to face against so many overgods, but he appeared composed and fearless on the surface. Indeed, the overgods had increased from over 50 to over 60. The peak experts of the divine kingdoms in the surroundings had all gathered here. Every single one of them represented an ancestor of an organization. They were the few peak experts who sat at the very top in their own divine kingdoms. Little brother, who are you? Which clan or sect do you come from? Master Chanlong stared at Jian calmly. Basically, no one among the overgods knew the story about God King Duanmu's jade that had been spread or the fact that 3 tiny clans had once possessed the God King's jade. They had really suspected Jian to possess a great background when they saw him in the dwelling. Chapter 1743, Ling Ho Gong. As a result, the other overgods said nothing when they saw how Master Chanlong had asked the questions they wanted to know the answer to as well. They all stared at Jian coldly. I am Jian. I do not come from any clan or sect. I am an independent cultivator, Jian said indifferently with clasped hands. The overgods were all relieved when they heard that Jian was an independent cultivator. Soon afterwards, their gazes towards Jian became hostile. Brat, the key to the dwelling is on you. Who knows how many times you've entered this place in the past? You must have found a lot of good things in the past years, right? A skinny, middle-aged man stepped out from the group. He stared at Jian sharply. At the same time, a powerful presence radiated from him and crushed down on Jian. The skinny man was an early overgod. Jian immediately felt like he had been thrown into the churning seas when the pressure descended upon him. It was like endless amounts of huge waves were striking his body. If his laws of the sword had not broken through, he would have definitely failed to resist the skinny man's powerful presence. However, he had reached sword spirit now, so even though his personal cultivation was lacking, his comprehension of laws was at the same level as the skinny man, or even slightly beyond his. Jian's expression did not change at all. Suddenly, sharp sword chi radiated from him. At that moment, he seemed to have become a divine sword as the powerful and sharp sword chi directly dispersed the middle-aged man's tremendous presence. The skinny man's presence could no longer approach Jian Chen. Jian Chen did not lose the upper hand in a battle of presence because his comprehension of laws was no weaker than the skinny man's. A gleam of light flashed through the skinny man's eyes. He stared at Jian Chen with some surprise, as if he had not considered that Jian Chen could have comprehended the laws of the world to a similar level as his. You've actually also comprehended the laws of the sword. An interjection of surprise rang out in the group. An old man who carried a sword on his back made his way to the front. To no surprise, he was the Ling Ho Gong from the sword-seeking province of the divine kingdom of Pingtian. Ling Ho Gong stared at Jian Chen with much interest. His eyes shone brighter and brighter. He smiled. I've roamed through several divine kingdoms. Finally, I found another over-god who has also comprehended the laws of the sword like me. Jian Chen, why don't we find a time to spar once the matter of God King Duanmu is settled? We can pursue the sword together. Ling Ho Gong's gaze was straightforward. He radiated with righteousness like a man of noble character. Surprise and joy filled his face. He was a fanatic of the sword, but ever since he became an over-god, he had never found another expert on the same level that he could spar with anymore. For the sake of sparring, he had once left the divine kingdom of Pingtian and journeyed through the neighboring divine kingdoms. Although he did come across a few other people who comprehended the laws of the sword, they were basically all deities or gods. He did not come across a single over-god, which filled him with much regret. Yet today, he had found an over-god who also comprehended the laws of the sword, which he had spent many years searching for. He was absolutely overjoyed. As Ling Ho Gong walked out, a sliver of fear flashed through the eyes of many of the surrounding over-gods. Ling Ho Gong was only an early over-god, but he comprehended the laws of the sword, which was one of the laws known to possess the greatest offensive powers among the 3,000 laws, just like the laws of destruction and the way of slaughter. As a result, Ling Ho Gong was extremely powerful, where there were barely any over-gods who comprehended other laws that were his opponent at the same level. In the past, Ling Ho Gong had even fought a mid-over-god who comprehended the laws of fire to a draw. Ling Ho Gong's name had spread through all the surrounding divine kingdoms with that. Jian Chen could obviously sense Ling Ho Gong to be a person of noble character, or he would not give off such a sense of righteousness. As a result, Jian Chen clasped his fist in response. If I have the chance some other day, we can definitely study the sword together, senior. Ha, what's senior? Jian Chen, you can just call me Ling Ho Gong. Ling Ho Gong laughed aloud. He was ecstatic about finding another over-god who could study the sword with him. However, Ling Ho Gong's eyes narrowed soon after. He stared at Jian Chen in both doubt and surprise as he asked, Jian Chen, your cultivation doesn't seem to have reached over-god? Ling Ho Gong was extremely surprised when he saw Jian Chen's level of cultivation. Although he was unable to properly gauge Jian Chen's strength, the senses of over-gods were shockingly great, so not only had he discovered that Jian Chen was not an over-god, but he found that Jian Chen was not even a god. You have the level of comprehension of an over-god, but your personal cultivation is so limited. This. Ling Ho Gong was astounded inside. People like Jian Chen were extremely rare in the saints' world because no one was so good at comprehending that their comprehension of laws would end up completely exceeding their personal cultivation. Moreover, he could tell with a single glance that Jian Chen's cultivation was not at such a low level because of injuries. Instead, he had just not cultivated to the level of his comprehension. Naturally, the other over-gods could notice the abnormalities of Jian Chen if Ling Ho Gong could sense them. Gleams of light immediately flashed through their eyes with uncertainty. Looks like you've benefited greatly from God King Duanmu's dwelling, the skinny man sneered. He called out to Jian Chen coldly, so what if your comprehension of laws has reached the level of over-gods? Your personal cultivation is so weak. Before an over-god, you still can't fight back. Brat, Hand over your space ring obediently and tell us what kind of fortuitous encounter you had in the dwelling that allowed your comprehension to increase so quickly. If your answer satisfies us, we might spare you. Otherwise, you should know what would happen. Jian Chen's face immediately sank in response to the skinny man's threats. He stared coldly at him and said with a gruff voice, "Come get my space ring if you want it. I'd like to see if you have the right to take it. You're looking to die." A gleam of killing intent flashed through the skinny man's eyes. A spear appeared in his hand, and he directly stabbed it towards Jian Chen with the laws of wood. Although Jian Chen's comprehension of laws was not weaker than his, the skinny man did not treat Jian Chen with much importance at all due to his limited cultivation. However, the skinny man still did not act carelessly. He used the power of his laws in his attack. A cold gleam of light flashed through Jian Chen's eyes. However, at this moment, Ling Hogong struck out instead. He directly drew the sword on his back, and it shone brilliantly. It landed on the skinny man's spear with surging sword chi. Just this single attack had forced back the skinny man. "Ling Hogong, what are you doing?" The skinny man glared at Ling Hogong, but there was a sliver of fear in the depths of his eyes. God King Duanmu is already dead. Those who are fated to will obtain his treasures. Ling Hogong wielded his sword as he said righteously. The skinny man's face sank. If Ling Hogong wanted to protect Jian Chen, he really would not be able to do anything with his strength. However, when he glanced past the other overgods around him, he could not help but sneer. Ling Hogong was very powerful, but there were still a few other overgods more powerful than him present. Just when the skinny man wanted to ask someone to hold back Ling Hogong, Jian Chen's voice rang out, "Ling Hogong, since he wants my space ring so much, let him come and get it. Let's see whether he had the ability to take my space ring or not." Chapter 1744, Deterrence. The skinny man's face became even more sunken when he heard Jian Chen's naked provocation. Cold killing intent had already appeared in his eyes. Ling Hogong looked at Jian Chen. Although Jian Chen's comprehension of laws had reached the level of overgods, his personal cultivation was just too weak. On the other hand, the skinny man had reached overgod in both comprehension and cultivation. Even if Jian Chen had comprehended the laws of the sword, which was one of the laws with the greatest offense, Ling Hogong still did not believe that Jian Chen was the skinny man's opponent. However, Ling Hogong had nothing to say when he saw Jian Chen's confident bearing. He backed off to one side with his sword. He also wanted to see just what Jian Chen possessed that allowed him to not fear the skinny man. Master Chanlong, along with the several dozen overgods present, all remained silent. However, without any exception, their rather sharp gazes were all focused on Jian Chen. Many people believed that Jian Chen had managed to comprehend laws far greater than his personal cultivation due to some fortuitous encounter in the dwelling. However, they did not want to take the lead in the matter, so they were more than happy for the skinny man to attack Jian Chen. Unless they were forced to, they really did not want to offend an overgod so easily, especially one who had comprehended the laws of the sword that were known to be one of the laws with the greatest offense. Of course, there was another reason why they did not want to fight. They had not seen something that interested them. Once something that would be extremely beneficial to them appeared, they would be willing to throw their lives on the line even if there were others at a higher level of cultivation altogether, let alone just people who had comprehended the laws of the sword. The young man with a fan and the middle-aged man referred to as Uncle Qin made their way into the God King's dwelling leisurely, walking behind everyone else. The young man looked around the entire way as if he found everything around him interesting. Is this God King Duamu's dwelling? Why doesn't it seem impressive at all? The young man looked around and said with some disappointment. The middle-aged man remained silent. However, when he gazed into the depths of the dwelling and saw Jian Chen, a gleam of light actually flashed through his indifferent eyes. The comprehension of an overgod, but only the cultivation of a deity. What great talent! However, the energy he uses seems to be rather strange, which even seems blurry in my eyes. He does not practice a regular cultivation method, Uncle Qin murmured. Uncle Qin, are you talking about that person called Jian Chen? Since even you've described his talent as great, he really should be talented. I wonder how long he has been cultivating for, the young man said leisurely as he fanned himself gently. Uncle Qin became rather stern. In the end, he could not help but sigh in amazement. Young master, I feel that this person has been cultivating for less than 1,000 years. It's the first time I, Qin Zheng, have seen a talent like this. The young man paused when he heard that. He stared at Uncle Qin in shock and said in disbelief, "What? He has been cultivating for less than 1,000 years? Doesn't that make his talent even greater than mine?" "Uncle Qin, are you certain?" "With the great disparity between our cultivation, there are a lot of things I can see through with a single glance, so there's nothing wrong with it." "He has been cultivating for an even shorter time than you, young master," said Qin Zheng. The young man immediately beamed. He said, "I heard that he's an independent cultivator before, without any clans or sects behind him. Uncle Qin, we have to rope in this person. It'll be best if he joins our clan." Uncle Qin's eyes shone brighter and brighter. He immediately expanded the senses of his soul and swept through all the regions that had lost their formations in the dwelling. He had naturally captured the sword comprehension building that Jian Chen had been in before. However, not a single overgod present had sensed Uncle Qin's senses of the soul, including the few late overgods. In just a single moment, Uncle Qin discovered that Jian Chen and the others had spent quite some time in the sword comprehension building through a few traces left behind. He immediately became even more joyful and said, "Looks like he comprehended his laws of the sword in the sword comprehension building. The mark that Duanmu left in there isn't anything impressive, so benefiting from it is nothing easy." However, Jian Chen managed to break through to overgod just through the mark. What a great affinity for comprehension. It would a great service to the clan if we really do rope him in. Since we want to rope him in, why don't we hurry? Jian Chen is in trouble right now. It's a good opportunity for us, the young man with a fan said eagerly. No hurry. There's no need to hurry. We can see his strength in the meantime, said Qin Zheng. On the other side of the group, the skinny Meni had already begun moving. He wielded his spear as the laws of wood condensed from the surroundings, stabbing towards Jian Chen with the power of laws. The skinny man did not hold back with his attack. His gaze was cold, directly stabbing towards Jian Chen's forehead to kill him. A gleam of cold light flashed through Jian Chen's eyes as well when the skinny man stabbed out. With a thought, 2 finger-sized strands of profound sword qi appeared. They radiated with powerful sword intent, immediately making the expression of over half of the overgods present change. Even the eyes of late overgods narrowed. Everyone's face changed at that moment. All their attention was focused on Jian Chen, or more accurately, the 2 strands of sword qi above Jian Chen's head. The 2 tiny strands threatened all of them. The weaker they were, the stronger the sense of threat they felt. The skinny man's face changed drastically. Without any hesitation, his hand tremored, and he struck out with even more power than before. Swish! With a flash of silver light, one of the sword qi above Jian Chen's head shot out. It moved extremely quickly, having surpassed the speed of lightning. It collided with the skinny man's spear. Boom! A deafening sound rang out from the clash. The skinny man only felt a great force directly knock his spear aside while his laws of wood were directly dispersed by the sword qi. The profound sword qi had nullified his attack easily. It did not just stop there. After smashing through the skinny man's attack, the profound sword qi remained just as powerful before, continuing onwards with the same sword intent that terrified the overgods. It directly shot towards the skinny man's forehead under his shocked gaze. No! The skinny man bellowed out in fear. He was completely unable to dodge the incoming sword qi. All he could do was watch it expand as it neared him and approached his forehead. Silently, the profound sword qi shot through the skinny man's forehead and emerged from behind. The skinny man's gaze became stunned. Fear lingered in his eyes. His soul had not even been able to escape before the profound sword chi, and it was directly wiped out on the spot. Chapter 1745, A Foothold Plop. The skinny man's body struck the floor. His eyes remained wide open, dying with regrets. Perhaps even he himself had never expected Jian Chen to possess such terrifying strength. The profound sword chi had killed him instantly, where even his soul could not escape. It fell silent for a time after that. Everyone stared at Jian Chen and the dead man on the ground in disbelief as their hearts churned. The other early overgods could not help but stagger backwards. Their gazes towards Jian Chen were filled with fear. All of them shivered when they realized that another strand of profound sword chi hovered above Jian Chen's head. Jian Chen did not immediately put away the second strand of profound sword chi. The finger-sized sword chi remained above his head, radiating with surging sword intent as if it was warning all the overgods present. Ling Hogong also gasped. His gaze towards Jian Chen underwent a tremendous change, and he also found himself to be quite the fool. He had originally believed that Jian Chen was not the skinny man's opponent and wanted to help him out, but looking at it now, he did not need any help at all. With just a single attack, he slew an early overgod. Jian Chen's strength left Ling Hogong astounded. What was that? Was it some treasure? Or some secret technique? Or some powerful battle skill? Did a god king leave behind those two strands of sword chi? It's impossible for the sword chi to be left behind by a god king. I think it's some powerful sword technique. He killed an early overgod instantly with a single strand of sword chi. If he used them simultaneously, even mid-overgods would not be able to fend it off. Even late overgods would become heavily injured. The surrounding overgods all communicated with one another secretly as they discussed the profound sword chi with great intensity. Jian Chen had succeeded in showing off his might by killing the skinny man, and everyone present had witnessed his power. They understood that he was not a person they could just provoke. Jian Chen knew that he had already gained a foothold among the overgods, so he slowly put the second strand of profound sword chi away. He looked around and clasped his fist towards everyone. Everyone, I do not know much about God King Duanmu's dwelling, but I am willing to share what I know with everyone. All their faces changed when they heard that. Jian Chen is willing to share the information about the dwelling with everyone. You have my admiration, Jian Chen. Ling Hogong clasped his hands towards Jian Chen. I am Guhan Shui. Thank you, Jian Chen. Once the matter regarding the dwelling has been resolved, I hope you can visit my Guhan clan as a guest. Although I have not comprehended the laws of the sword, we can share and discuss our experiences and knowledge regarding cultivation. Jian Chen turned around. Guhan Shui was a great beauty who only seemed to be in her 20s. I also hope Jian Chen can visit my Feng family in the future as well. I've studied formations a little. Although this old man is unable to study the sword with you like Ling Hogong, this old man does like alcohol very much and has collected a lot of it. This old man just wonders if you do me the honor of drinking together. Feng Buell smiled. He referred to himself as an old man, but in reality, he only seemed to be in his 20s. He was handsome and graceful. However, Jian Chen did not find it surprising at all because even though a few people did not seem particularly old among the overgods present, they were all monsters who had cultivated for dozens or even hundreds of millennia. A few of the surrounding overgods immediately tried to befriend Jian Chen. As a person who wielded the laws of the sword, there were very few people who could defeat Jian Chen unless they had comprehended a law that possessed similar offense. Moreover, his powerful strands of profound sword chi struck fear into everyone's heart. By talking to him, they acted as if even if they could not befriend him, they would not want to become his enemy. Jian Chen returned their greetings one by one. Through his conversations with them, he managed to gain an initial understanding of some of the overgods. None of them were simple. However, Jian Chen also understood that these people were so friendly because there was no conflict of interest yet. Once they ventured into the depths of the dwelling and had to fight for God King Duanmu's treasures, they could become opponents or even enemies at any time. Soon afterwards, Jianchen shared everything he knew about God King Duanmu's dwelling. In reality, none of it was a secret. It was just information on the situation in the dwelling. The overgods could obtain the information just by looking. When they learnt that Jianchen had only obtained the items left behind by God King Duanmu's disciple, they did not become interested at all. They were all the ancestors of clans and sects, so they had all accumulated a vast wealth across the years. What really interested them in God King Duanmu's dwelling was his legacy. They naturally felt no interest towards what the disciple owned. Of course, they did not know about the previous pills Jianchen had found, like the soul recovery pill. Otherwise, they would lose their composure. With that, no one purposefully targeted Jianchen anymore. At the same time, due to the shocking strength he had demonstrated, no one dared to provoke him without good reason, even with the great disparity between his comprehended laws and personal cultivation. The skinny man had become the best example of what would happen if they did that. With Master Qianlong in the lead, everyone continued forwards. Jianchen also mixed into the group and followed everyone towards the very depths of the dwelling. The space ring from the overgod he had slain ended up in Jianchen's hands as well. Jianchen checked through the space ring and found that the skinny man was nowhere near as wealthy as God King Duanmu's disciple. However, there were still a lot of divine crystals, including low, mid, and high-grade crystals. There were also other random materials and a few pills. Jianchen casually put away the space ring, sending it into the Bright Moon Divine Hall silently. After passing on some information, he gave all the low and mid-grade divine crystals to everyone in the Divine Hall to use for cultivation. He kept the high-grade divine crystals for himself, as he planned to exchange them for mid-grade divine crystals in the future. However, to Jianchen's surprise, Shangguan Mu'er, who had remained within the Divine Hall for the entire time absorbing divine crystals, had reached the peak of reciprocity and was about to attain godhood. The cultivation of the others had increased drastically as well. The white tiger and seven-colored heaven-devouring beast were only slightly slower than Shangguan Mu'er. They had reached reciprocity, and they were currently at early reciprocity. Chapter 1746. The very depths among the group who had come up from the Tianyuan continent, Shangguan Mu'er, the white tiger, and the seven-colored heaven-devouring beast had strengthened up the fastest. They were also the strongest three among them. Xiongzhong still remained at early reciprocity. Rui Jin, Hong Lian, and He Yu had all reached the origin realm. They had progressed past receival and reached returnance. Although they did not cultivate as quickly as the white tiger and the seven-colored heaven-devouring beast, they would still be regarded as geniuses with their level of talent in the saints' world. The senses of Jianchen's soul did not linger in the Bright Moon Divine Hall for long. It receded from the space ring, and he looked around at the overgods around him. Gradually, he became determined. He had already secretly made up his mind to assist the Mo clan in gaining a stable footing and also move them into the provincial city after the matters with God King Duanmu were settled. Once the Mo clan gained a stable status, he would let everyone out from the Divine Hall and allow them to remain in the Mo clan to cultivate. He did not do this in the past because he was not strong enough, and he had also offended the Lu family. However, the situation was different now. He was confident about gaining a stable footing within the divine kingdom of Pingtian with his current strength. After all, there were only so many overgods in the divine kingdom. There were only around a dozen when the ancestors from the 5 provinces and the overgods in the royal city were included. Moreover, most of them were only early overgods. Please wait, everyone. This formation is extremely powerful, so allow me to study it, Master Qianlong's old voice rang out. He sat before the formation and mysterious inscriptions appeared from his disc with the 8 trigrams. The surrounding overgods all sat down to rest. Master Qianlong was the person most skilled with formations amongst all of them, so the matter of destroying the formation had fallen to him. If it were not for Master Qianlong, who had found the foundation of the formation and gotten them to directly attack its weak points, they probably would not have been able to enter God King Duanmu's dwelling even with over 60 overgods gathered together. Jian Shen stared at Master Chanlong, who was studying the formation. Jian Shen also sat down quietly. Fairy Haoyu had previously found the weak point of the formation, but this point was not fixed. It would constantly move about as the formation operated, so he had no idea where the weak point had moved to now. In the current situation, it was clearly unsuitable for Fairy Haoyu appear. Once so many overgods took interest in Fairy Haoyu, even he himself would not be able to protect her, so he obviously could not count on Fairy Haoyu to smash through the formations. Many gods had entered God King Duanmu's dwelling by now. The overgods had already gathered on the path towards the very depths, so the gods did not dare to approach them. Instead, they dispersed everywhere in search of their own fortune. In the end, quite a few gods entered the dwellings of God King Duanmu's disciple and grand disciples in an attempt to comprehend the marks left in there. After them, even many deities entered. Brother Jian Shen, I heard that the people from the Mo clan and the Ando clan from the Dong'an province had entered the dwelling beforehand. Are you also a part of our divine kingdom of Pingtian? As the overgods rested, Ling Hogong instead made his way to Jian Shen's side and asked politely. A few of the overgods immediately opened their eyes when they heard Ling Hogong's question. They all looked at Jian Shen. I'm not from the divine kingdom of Pingtian, but now that you mention it, you can consider me as half a citizen, Jian Che smiled. He had arrived in the territory of the divine kingdom of Pingtian as soon as he came to the saints' world, so it was reasonable to describe himself as half a citizen. Ling Hogong chuckled, I was just asking casually, and I didn't think that I'd be right. Come, Jian Shen, let me introduce some people to you. You already knew Guhan Shui and Feng Buell. This is Eugene, the ancestor of the Yu family from the Daji province. Ling Hogong extended his finger towards a gray-haired old man as he said that. Eugene clasped his fist towards Jian Shen and smiled gently. This is Bing Lu, the ancestor of the Yubing clan of the frigid snow province. Ling Hogong continued his introduction. The hunchbacked old man with a dragon-headed staff nodded towards Jian Shen. He said in his old voice, Brother Jian Shen, if you have the time in the future, you have to come to visit my Yubing clan. Jian Shen returned his greeting. He planned to gain a stable footing in the divine kingdom of Pingtian, so there was naturally no harm in knowing a few overgods of the divine kingdom. Afterwards, Ling Hogong introduced a few more overgods to Jian Shen. They were the ones who had opened their eyes earlier. They all came from the divine kingdom of Pingtian. Jian Shen had already met a few of these overgods before. He understood that Ling Hogong was currently introducing them all to him because he wanted to rope him into the divine kingdom of Pingtian so that they would be able to work together against the overgods of the other divine kingdoms. This was because they did not want God King Duanmu's items to end up with people from other divine kingdoms. After all, God King Duanmu's dwelling was in their divine kingdom. Brother Jian Shen, I hope we can all work together when we fight for the treasure later so that we can fend off the outsiders together. Once we obtain the treasure, we can split it according to our contributions. I was wondering if you would be interested in joining us. A voice that only the overgods from the divine kingdom of Pingtian could hear rang in Jian Shen's head. Jian Shen knew that the person speaking was a middle-aged man called Yang Kai. He was an overgod from the royal city as well as the strongest overgod in the entire divine kingdom. He had reached late overgod. How can I decline since it's Senior Yang Kai who's asking? Moreover, with so many overgods present, we probably won't end up with anything if we fight by ourselves. Working together would be the best, Jian Shen replied secretly as well and agreed with Yang Kai. The overgods of the divine kingdom all beamed. They had witnessed Jian Shen's strength before. Killing early overgods was no problem for him, and he could even threaten mid-overgods, making him more powerful than a lot of them. Their side would become stronger with his addition. Time passed quickly. In the blink of an eye, a month had already passed since Master Chanlong had begun studying the formation. I've found the crucial point of the formation. Everyone, it'll all be up to you next, Master Chanlong's voice finally rang out after a month of studying the formation. Everyone stood up when they heard that. They all attacked the location Master Chanlong had specified. Jian could tell with a single glance that the method Master Chanlong used to break through formations was completely different from Fairy Hao Yu's. Fairy Hao Yu specified the weakest point of the formations, and this point would change as the formation constantly operated. However, the weakest point Master Chanlong found was a crucial point of the formation. It seemed to be fixed and would not move around. The formation collapsed very soon under the barrage of over 60 overgods. God King Duanmu was powerful, but he only possessed great mastery over the laws of space and the way of sword. His accomplishments with formations were not particularly great, so even though the formation was at the level of God King's, it was a relatively weaker version. God King Duanmu's formation naturally would not be able to pose a problem with Master Chanlong and the over 60 overgods present. Afterwards, everyone broke through one formation after another. In just a year's time, they arrived in the depths of the dwelling, where God King Duanmu used to cultivate. Chapter 1747. The 3 stone huts where God King Duanmu cultivated seemed extremely simple. There was no extravagant display or any luxurious decor. There were only 3 extremely ordinary stone huts and nothing else. It was very difficult to believe that this was a God King's dwelling, and a supreme God King's at that. After all, it just seemed too ordinary. In fact, it was not even as great as the cultivation places of small clans with gods. The place where a mighty God King cultivated was actually composed of 3 ordinary stone huts. This sight took all the overgods by surprise. To them, God King Duanmu's dwelling would definitely be extravagant, well decorated, and covered in treasures as a supreme God King. However, only 3 regular stone huts were presented before them. The stone used to build the huts were the most common material in the saints' world. They were nothing valuable, and the passage of time had already left behind irremovable traces. They were not protected by any formations. Is this really where God King Duanmu cultivated? Have we come to the wrong place? An early overgod asked within the group. He was the ancestor of a clan from the divine kingdom of Qingyang. He was not the only one who felt doubtful as similar thoughts crossed the heads of all the overgods present. Where God King Duanmu cultivated was just a little too shabby, and it was even worse than their personal space for cultivation. They found it very difficult to believe that a supreme God King would actually cultivate in a place like this. Master Chanlong looked around and said, "This is already the very depths of the dwelling, so it must be where God King Duanmu normally resided. It can't be wrong." Master Chanlong had been of great help along the way. Without him, the overgods would not have even managed to enter the dwelling, so he had already become a person of prestige among all the overgods. Everything he said carried weight, so his words just then had confirmed this place to be where God King Duanmu cultivated. Uncertainty flickered through the eyes of many overgods. They observed the surroundings carefully, and they allowed the senses of their soul to envelope the region, filling the entire space. Although they were unable to extend their senses into the stone huts, they had found that no formations existed there either. Many of the overgods wanted to move. They yearned for the 3 stone huts, but none of them moved by themselves. Instead, they all looked towards Master Chanlong and were extremely cautious. Although they had failed to sense the existence of any formations, they all understood that this did not mean there were no formations hidden from their senses. If Master Chanlong did not move, they did not dare to move either. Master Chanlong closed his eyes and the 8 trigrams disc in his hand shone with black and white light. Vaguely, a huge Taiji diagram revolved around him as mysterious inscriptions flickered. A while later, Master Chanlong opened his eyes. A gleam of joy flickered through his eyes before he quickly hid it. However, under the attention of all the overgod present, his sudden change was captured by them all. "Please wait. I will go ahead and check first," Master Chanlong said to everyone as if nothing had happened. His 8 trigrams disc hovered above his head and shone with resplendent light as he walked forwards. The overgods all followed behind Master Chanlong as uncertainty flickered through their eyes. At this moment, Master Chanlong sped up abruptly and turned into a blur. He charged towards the first stone hut quickly. Master Chanlong's every single movement weighed on the minds of everyone, so when they saw him suddenly speed up, a gleam of light flickered through the eyes of all the overgods behind him. Without any hesitation, their speeds exploded, and they turned into blurs as well as they charged towards the first hut as quickly as they could. Jian Chen was not an exception. He also planned to charge towards the stone hut, but as soon as he began to move, Fairy Hao Yu's voice rang out in his head. "Don't go over." These 3 short words caused Jian Chen shiver inside. He watched the overgods around him charge towards the first stone hut in a hurry while he halted without any hesitation. At the same time, he secretly communicated with Ling Hogong and the other overgods of the divine kingdom of Pingtian. Ling Hogong and the other overgods became stunned when they received Jian Chen's message. Ling Hogong immediately halted. The other overgods did not stop immediately after receiving Jian Chen's warning, but they did slow down. Master Chanlong, who was just about to reach the first hut, smiled slyly. He came to a sudden halt before rapidly retreating. It was also at this moment that the space ripped open silently. A streak of light that was several dozen meters in length emerged and cleaved towards everyone with surging sword chi. The expressions of all the overgods changed drastically from the sudden turn of events. Before they could even curse the slyness of Master Chanlong, they all came to a halt and retreated even faster than they had run before. Not everyone managed to escape. Under the sword chi, over a dozen overgods became immobilized. They were unable to dodge the sword chi, so they could only take it on forcefully. The overgods were all experienced, so they bellowed out together. They used their entire strength to launch their strongest attack towards the sword chi in an attempt to disperse it with the force of over a dozen people. However, God King Duanmu had left behind the sword chi before he passed away. It was so powerful that even God Kings were unable to endure it, let alone overgods. The huge sword chi tore through the attacks from the overgods like they were nothing and sliced down in a flash. 8 overgods turned to dust silently and not even any blood or flesh was left behind. The other overgods were closer to the edge of the sword chi, so they had not been directly struck and fortunately survived. However, they all vomited blood and were heavily injured. 3 of them were only left with a small part of their body. They were extremely heavily wounded. "Master Chanlong, you're despicable." The surviving overgods all became furious as they swore at Master Chanlong before immediately ingesting a large number of healing pills to recover. The other overgods who had managed to retreat in time looked at Master Chanlong furiously. They understood very well that they had fallen for Master Chanlong's schemes. If they had been a little slower before, they probably would have died to the huge sword chi. Chapter 1748, Liquid Lime. Master Chanlong sighed and said sorrowfully, "I failed to sense that God King Duanmu had prepared something there. If I hadn't reacted in time, the sword chi would have killed me as well. I am deeply sorry for what you've suffered. Master Chanlong, it looks like you wants us all to die so that you can enjoy God King Duanmu's legacy all by yourself," Yang Kai from the divine kingdom of Pingtian said coldly. He was a late overgod and did not fear Master Chanlong. Master Chanlong said innocently, "You're mistaken. I never had such intentions. I did say before that I was only going ahead to check. I never said it would be safe. It was you who charged over." The overgods were speechless with that. Master Chanlong was telling the truth. They could only blame themselves. However, everyone's attitude towards Master Chanlong changed slightly after this incident. They remained cautious about him, no longer trusting him like before. Master Chanlong did not care about this at all. The items God King Duanmu left behind were just far too attractive. Compared to them, fame and prestige were nothing. "Thank you, Brother Jian Chen," Ling Hogong's grateful voice rang out in Jian Chen's head. All the other overgods from the divine kingdom of Pingtian thanked Jian Chen secretly. If it were not for Jian Chen's warning, some of them probably would have died to the sword chi as well. "Brother Jian Chen, how did you know that there was danger ahead?" Yang Kai also asked secretly. "Senior Yang Kai, you're overestimating me. How would I know whether there's danger or not? I just felt like these 3 stone huts are a little too simple, replied Jian Chen. The other overgods had heard his words as well. Sigh, looks like brother Jian Chen is the calm one. We were too reckless earlier. None of us were able to resist God King Duanmu's treasures, so our desire clouded our vigilance, Bing Lu sighed gently. They clearly understood what Jian Chen was trying to say. They had lost their usual calm due to their attraction to the treasure in the room and the provocation of the people around them. Jian Chen said nothing more. Instead, he stared at where the sword Qi had swung down from before sternly. He was quite disturbed. He had just witnessed 8 overgods being reduced to nothingness before a strand of sword Qi that was enough to cause everyone present to pale. They did not even leave behind their space rings. The other overgods only managed to survive because they were towards the edge of the attack. They had not received the full blow of the sword Qi, or they probably would not be alive either. Is this the strength of a God King? Even God King Duanmu, who failed to make the rankings of the God King's throne, is so powerful. Just how terrifyingly powerful are Adriana and Protector Shui then? Jian Chen thought. He could not help but think of the 2 God Kings he had encountered on the Tian Yuan continent. The 2 of them were experts who were ranked on the God King's throne, making them much more powerful than Duanmu. Protector Shui, in particular, was even ranked 9th. In the past, even though Jian Chen felt that Adriana and Protector Shui were unfathomable, even though he knew they were God Kings, he had no concept of a God King at all. Only after the sword Qi from God King Duanmu appeared did he gain a deeper understanding towards the terrifying power of Adriana and Protector Shui. In his eyes, overgods were experts who could reign supreme over an entire region. A divine kingdom only possessed a little over a dozen overgods, yet they were so weak before God King Duanmu's sword Qi. They were not even as great as ants. Everyone, I will continue checking for dangers, Master Chanlong said at this moment. The inscriptions on the disc in his hand flickered rapidly before hovering before him. Master Chanlong stared at the disc. He formed a seal with his hand, advancing towards the stone hut as if he had predicted anything. Everyone no longer trusted Master Chanlong as much after the previous punishment. As a result, they did not follow him when they saw him checking for dangers as they were afraid that they would fall for his tricks again. After all, no one present was as great as Master Chanlong at formations. If Master Chanlong really did want to use the formations here against them, they would struggle to sense it. Master Chanlong got closer and closer to the first hut under everyone's gazes. When he arrived at the position before, a strand of sword Qi did not appear from the space there. Clearly, there was only that single strand of sword Qi from before. In the end, Master Chanlong arrived before the stone hut successfully. He pressed his hand against the stone door slowly and pushed it gently. The door immediately opened, and Master Chanlong beamed, entering it in a flash. Did he just enter like that? The several dozen overgods were all stunned and they saw how Master Chanlong just disappeared into the stone hut. They found it rather difficult to believe that he had entered the hut so easily. However, they all responded accordingly. Without any hesitation, they all charged into the stone hut as well. This time, they did not come across any obstacles. Clearly, there was only that single strand of sword Qi from before. Jian Chen, Ling Hogong and the other overgods all entered the stone hut as well. When Jian Chen stepped through the entrance, the landscape around him changed. He had arrived in an extremely large space and around him were the several dozen overgods who had entered before him. The stone hut only seemed to be around 10 square meters in size, but clearly, God King Duanmu had modified its interior with his laws of space, creating a miniature world. That's liquid lime. Suddenly, someone cried out. There was a basin-sized ditch near a few boulders. It was filled with a milky liquid that gave off a delightful fragrance. It really is liquid lime. Liquid lime is said to be able to cleanse godhood experts of impurities and can refine their origin energy. It can also suppress various poisons and remove any resistance developed from ingesting large numbers of heavenly resources. It's extremely valuable, where every drop is priceless. That's not all to it. If the liquid lime is used on those below godhood, just a single drop will be enough to alter their constitution, even strengthen their ability to comprehend, making comprehending the laws of the world much easier. Liquid lime doesn't only increase the affinity to comprehend for those below deity. Even for over-gods, it is effective. High-quality liquid lime can even help god kings, making them invaluable. The only downside is that the increase in ability to comprehend is only temporarily. Once the effects subside, everything returns to normal. That's a huge basin of liquid lime. That's at least 1,000 drops. Look at it. God King Duanmu's a supreme god king after all, so how could he be shabby? The overgods present all became filled with eagerness with the appearance of the basin of liquid lime. All of them charged over joyfully. Before they even arrived before it, they had already taken out various bottles, ready to store the liquid lime away. Everyone wanted the liquid lime. At the same time, no one wished for someone else to be faster than them, so the person at the very front naturally became the target of attacks. An overgod who had comprehended the laws of wind was at the forefront, so he drew in the attacks of several dozen overgods. Several dozen terrifying attacks shot towards the late overgod with surging energy. Chapter 1749. A fierce struggle. The expression of the late overgod at the forefront who comprehended the laws of wind changed drastically. Even though there were only a few late overgods in the group, he would still become heavily injured from the several dozen attacks, or even directly die. After all, a few of the attacks came from late overgods as well. The liquid lime was precious, but it was nothing compared to his life. At that moment, the overgod at the very front immediately gave up on the liquid lime without any hesitation at all. With a single movement, he left behind an afterimage and reappeared several hundred meters away, avoiding all their attacks. With his departure, the overgods at the very front became Yang Kai from the divine kingdom of Pingtian, Master Chanlong, and 5 other late overgods. The 7 of them basically moved at the same speed as they charged towards the liquid lime. Liquid lime was useful to even overgods. What truly attracted their attention was the liquid lime's effect that increased one's ability to comprehend, as that would make comprehending the laws of the world much easier. If they were lucky, they could even become god kings thanks to it. However, liquid lime was very rare and precious. Basically, all the clans and sects that were far more powerful had monopolized it, making it very difficult for them to purchase any. They would naturally become interested in such a large basin of liquid lime. In their eyes, the liquid lime was a chance to reach God King. Even though it was only a tiny sliver of a chance, they were still greatly attracted to it. Powerful origin energy and laws pulsed in the surroundings as the several dozen mid and early overgods struck out at that moment. They launched powerful attacks towards the 7 late overgods at the very front in an attempt to stop them. Ling Ho Gong had struck out as well, swinging his sword to send a sword chi directly towards Master Chanlong. It was chaotic. At that moment, no one cared whether they were fighting against mid or late overgods. Their desire for the liquid lime had drawn all of them over. All the 7 late overgods at the very front used protective treasures to block the attacks. They did not slow down at all and even sped up instead. On the other hand, a formation disc hovered above Master Chanlong's head. It was immediately activated, and it enveloped him in a powerful, protective formation. The formation remained around him the entire time, moving along with him. With a series of booms, the attack struck the 7 late overgods at the forefront. Their protective treasures and formations flickered. Aside from Master Chanlong, everyone else paled. They had all endured attacks from several experts at the same level as them, so even with defensive treasures, it was impossible for them to emerge unscathed. However, the 7 overgods did not slow down at all after taking on these attacks. Instead, they accelerated after being hit and arrived before the stone basin with the liquid lime in a single moment. The stone basin was only the size of a large bowl, yet there were 7 of them in total. It was impossible for them to all crowd around the basin, so they all attacked the people around them in order to collect the liquid lime. They wanted to force back their competitors. The disturbance was huge from the fight between several overgods. The terrifying shockwaves reverberated towards the basin, and it immediately cracked. The violent energy splayed the liquid lime into the air, splitting the liquid into hundreds of globs. As the energy spread out, the liquid lime also flew out in all directions like scattered blossoms. Take the liquid lime. Every man for himself. Someone cried out. With that, no one cared about the late overgods anymore. They all scattered in every direction as their eyes burned with desire. They chased the scattering liquid lime as quickly as possible as various jade bottles appeared in their hands. The late overgod who had comprehended the laws of wind was the fastest. No one was faster than him in terms of speed, so he collected 3 globs, totaling to over 20 droplets. Jianchen looked around, and his eyes narrowed very soon. His eyes lit up. 2 globs of liquid lime, one large and one small, directly flew in his direction. However, 3 other overgods approached the 2 globs rapidly. They were clearly targeting these globs. Jianchen charged over without any hesitation at full speed. With a flip of his hand, a jade bottle appeared, and he immediately scooped up the 2 globs of liquid lime. The eyes of the 3 overgods who originally wanted to take the liquid lime turned cold. They glared at Jianchen and did not leave to go collect the other liquid lime. Instead, they continued onwards in the same direction and directly encircled Jianchen. They all wanted the larger glob that Jianchen had taken away. That single glob of liquid lime was 3 or 5 times larger than the smaller one. A gleam of cold light flashed through Jianchen's eyes when he sensed their movement. With a thought, the 2 strands of profound sword qi immediately appeared, radiating with sword intent. The sword qi was so powerful that it drew over the attention of all the overgods present. They all looked towards Jianchen in fear. It had already been a year since Jianchen last used the profound sword qi. Jianchen had already fully recovered the power of his soul during that period of time, so he could use 2 strands of profound sword qi again. The expressions of the 3 overgods who charged towards Jianchen changed abruptly when they saw the profound sword qi appear. They all came to a halt as fear filled their eyes as well. They were 2 early overgods and 1 mid-overgod. However, they no longer dared to approach Jianchen as his profound sword qi had appeared. Jianchen did not shoot his profound sword qi. Instead, he let them hover above his head to deter the people around him. Afterwards, he clasped his hands towards the 3 overgods and said, I only want these 2 globs. There are still a few more in the surroundings that have not been collected, so if you continue wasting time here, you might have to leave empty-handed. The 3 overgods mulled over the thought. In the end, they did not risk trying to take what Jianchen had collected. They scattered to fight over the few remaining globs of liquid lime in the surroundings. In just a few seconds, the basin of liquid lime had all been collected. The late overgods naturally collected the most, with the overgod who comprehended the laws of wind in particular. He seemed to have collected over 50 droplets. Of course, not everyone managed to collect something. The weaker overgods were left empty-handed. They failed to even get a single droplet, and they had even suffered heavy injuries that left them pale-faced. The overgods who had been injured by the hidden sword qi earlier failed to collect anything as well as they were still injured. Their faces were extremely sunken. Jianchen put his bottle of liquid lime away happily. Although he did not obtain a lot of it, he still managed to acquire around 20 droplets. He was satisfied with that. He knew that his only method of fending off overgods was through his profound sword qi. If he used up both strands, he would no longer be an overgod's opponent. It was already quite impressive for him to be able to obtain around 20 droplets. Chapter 1750. The chaotic heavens sword style. After the liquid lime had all been collected, everyone scattered in search of their own fortuitous encounters. They scoured the land. The overgods of the divine kingdom of Pingtian scattered and headed off in different directions. However, Ling Hogong and Jianchen moved together as they discussed the sword. Jian Shen and Ling Hogong shared their experiences on cultivation as they searched through the space. Although they could use the senses of their soul, there were some things that could avoid this detection method. Such things could only be found by the naked eye at a close distance. Boom! At this moment, there was a rumble in the distance, and an intense battle erupted. Over a dozen overgods fought against each other, and more people joined the fight. Even 3 late overgods took part in the devastating battle. It's the Chaotic Heavens Sword Style. Someone has obtained the Chaotic Heavens Sword Style. A vague cry rang out along with the constant booms. The Chaotic Heavens Sword Style? Jian Shen murmured softly. Clearly, this was the first time he had heard of something like that. On the other hand, a gleam of light flashed through Ling Hogong's eyes as desire appeared in them. He said, the Chaotic Heavens Sword Style is the cultivation method God King Duanmu practiced. He also used it for his comprehension of the laws of the sword. It's not just a cultivation method. It possesses several powerful sword techniques as well. It's said that an expert of the primordial realm created it. I never expected that it would appear here. As he said that, the battle in the distance became more and more intense. There were now 5 late overgods taking part, including Yang Kai from the divine kingdom of Pingtian. The battle for the sword style was devastating, covering many people with blood and wounds. The person who had originally obtained the Chaotic Heavens Sword Style was a mid-god, but he was immediately faced with the attacks of 5 late overgods. In the end, he directly died on the spot, while the sword style ended up in the hands of a late overgod. However, as soon as the late overgod obtained the Chaotic Heavens Sword Style, he received the attacks of everyone present, becoming heavily injured in a single instance. In the end, he threw out several defensive formation discs and blew up his own weapon to finally break out, fleeing with his injured body. Suddenly, an azure figure shot over hurriedly from afar. It moved extremely quickly, catching up with the late overgod in a single moment. It caught the injured late overgod off guard and pierced his head before fleeing after grabbing the Chaotic Heavens Sword Style. He left the miniature world in the blink of an eye. He was so fast that the other late overgods were unable to catch up. Ao Tong, don't you think you'll have any peace once you make it out of here? Someone roared out furiously from behind. Their voice was filled with regret. To no surprise, the person who had stolen the Chaotic Heavens Sword Style in the end was the late overgod who had comprehended the laws of wind. Jian Shen was astounded as he watched on from afar. A late overgod had actually fallen just like that. He was the first late overgod to die in God King Duanmu's dwelling. At this moment, the world began to tremble violently. The sky began to collapse as the ground cracked. Violent laws of space wreaked havoc, causing the entire place to shake wildly. The space in the distance was reduced to nothingness at a visible rate. It had actually vanished as if a terrifying beast had devoured it, leading to a huge commotion. Oh no, the world's collapsing. This world has existed for too long. After so much time without God King Duanmu's support of laws of space, it can't endure the fierce attacks, run, or will be reduced to nothingness along with the space. We'll be doomed, the overgods all cried out as they flew towards the entrance quickly. Jian Shen and Ling Hogong reacted in the first moment as well, fleeing towards the entrance as quickly as they could. Large expanses of space collapsed behind the two of them, reduced to nothingness. Spatial cracks littered everywhere, making it extremely terrifying. The space collapsed extremely quickly, basically tailing Jian Shen and Ling Hogong. If the two of them had been slightly slower, they would have been devoured mercilessly. Further behind, there were 2 early overgods far away from the entrance. Coupled with the fact that they flew relatively slowly, they directly vanished in the collapsing space under Jian Shen and Ling Hogong's gazes. Their fates were unknown. Jian Shen and Ling Hogong secretly gritted their teeth and pushed their speeds to the limit. They seemed to have become faint blurs as they charged towards the entrance as quickly as possible. Jian Shen had even made the preparations to use the linear lightning release at any time. Fortunately, the two of them reached the entrance unscathed and made their way out instantly, vanishing from the collapsing world. Only 2 of the stone huts remained outside. The first stone hut had been reduced to dust. A few more overgods were lost among those who gathered outside the hut. Aside from the mid and late overgods who had died during the battle for the chaotic heaven sword style, 4 overgods had vanished because they could not escape from the collapsing space in time. Ao Tong really isn't here. Looks like he has left the dwelling with the chaotic heavens sword style, a stern voice rang out. It came from a late overgod who had fought for the chaotic heavens sword style. What can we do? He has comprehended the laws of wind. If he wants to leave, we can't stop him, said Yang Kai with an extremely sunken face. It was said that a primordial realm expert created the chaotic heavens sword style. It was an unimaginable treasure to the overgods, enough for them to forsake the future of their clans. Everyone desired it. At this moment, the heavy smell of blood suddenly appeared. The overgods who had just emerged from the first stone hut all frowned. When they looked in the direction of the bloody smell, they saw over 100 corpses before the second and third stone huts. The corpses were incomplete. All of them had suffered extremely horrific deaths, either losing most of their bodies or losing their heads completely. The missing body parts seemed to have vanished altogether as well, without anything remaining. These gods sure are bold, an overgod said coldly when he saw what had happened. All the corpses there belonged to gods. When they were still in the first stone hut, the gods had tried to enter the second and third stone huts boldly. Master Chanlong chuckled. I was just worrying about how difficult the traps God King Duanmu set would be to dismantle. These gods sure are helpful, helping us a great deal by removing the traps God King Duanmu set. Looking at the handprints on the stone doors, clearly, a few gods have entered. The 2 huts are already safe now. Chapter 1751, A God King's Corpse. This time, no one doubted Master Chanlong because the handprints on the stone door were clear evidence that people had already entered the place. The traps God King Duanmu had set around probably only had a single attack. The first hut was the best example. The remaining overgods all entered the second hut. There was also a miniature world within the second hut. Moreover, God King Duanmu's laws of space had modified it, so it was much larger than the first hut. Mountains obscured the space, and there was a range of mountains that spanned as far as the eye could see. Sharp sword chi radiated from the mountains with a sense of supremacy. They were extremely powerful. There were a few mirror-like rock faces among the endless stretch of mountains. A few slashes were left on the rock faces, which were the source of the sword chi that permeated the surroundings. The sharp intent made all the overgods shiver. A few gods were scattered before the rock face with the slashes. All their gazes were fixated on it, they wanted to comprehend the laws of the sword within. With a boom, a few gods slashed at the mountains up ahead. They wanted to take the slashes on the rock face away with them. However, the mountains had already changed from being soaked in the sword chi for so long. They had become extraordinarily tough, so the full-powered attacks of the gods only left a mark on its surface. Severing the entire mountain and taking it away was basically impossible. This should be where God King Duanmu comprehended the sword, said Ling Hogong. His gaze was filled with joy. To him, this place was basically a supreme, treasured land. This was because he comprehended the laws of the sword. If he continued his comprehension here, it would definitely become much easier for him. A gleam of light flickered through Jian Chen's eyes as he too became excited. The sword slashes possessed the residue of what God King Duanmu had comprehended from the laws of the sword. To him, they would be just too helpful. They could assist him in comprehending the laws of the sword and reach the partial achievement of sword spirit in an even shorter amount of time. The overgods left very quickly. They had already understood this place. It was only where God King Duanmu comprehended the laws of the sword. It was not beneficial to them, nor were there any treasures, so it naturally did not attract them. In the blink of an eye, all the over-gods aside from Jian Chen and Ling Ho Gong had left. Jian Chen, we both comprehend the laws of the sword, so this place is basically a blessed land to the two of us. Why don't we cultivate here for a while? Ling Ho Gong asked. He wanted to stay behind. Jian Chen, leave here immediately. Go to the third hut. If I've guessed correctly, the third hut contains what I need. At this moment, Fairy Hao Yu's voice rang out in Jian Chen's head. Jian Chen clasped his fist towards Ling Ho Gong without any change in expression at all and said, "There's still one more hut left. I want to try my luck there for any impressive treasures and see what I can get." Ling Ho Gong clasped his fist back at Jian Chen and said, "I won't be going to the third hut. I want to cultivate here for a while in hopes that my comprehension of the laws of the sword will increase." Jian Chen, I wish you luck. Jian Chen left after bidding farewell to Ling Ho Gong. He looked towards the third stone hut. The ground outside the third hut was covered with corpses of gods. All of them were missing body parts, having suffered miserable deaths. Jian Chen casually glanced past the corpses, and his eyes suddenly narrowed. His gaze fell onto one of their faces. He just so happened to recognize the deceased god. He was one of the mid-gods from the Weiner clan who had hurried over when he, Mo Ling, and Ando Fu had opened the entrance to the dwelling. Close to him was a second person that Jian Chen recognized. He was the second mid-god from the Weiner clan. I never thought that the two mid-gods of the Weiner clan would both die here. Jian Chen sighed secretly as he felt pity. Then he made his way over the many corpses and entered the third hut. Compared to the two huts prior, the space within the third hut was much smaller. When Jian Chen entered, he discovered that all the over-gods had stopped there. Their gazes were all fixed ahead with mixed emotions. Jian Chen followed their gazes, and his eyes narrowed suddenly as well. Afterwards, his face also became filled with mixed emotions. There was admiration as well as pity. Before him sat a middle-aged man in green robes on a jade pedestal. His eyes were closed, and although he radiated with invisible sword qi that was filled with the presence of supremacy, he did not have any presence of life at all. God King Duanmu. Jian Chen's feeling became extremely mixed when he saw the middle-aged man. He was a supreme expert who had made it onto the God King's throne. Although he did not make the rankings, his strength was still shocking. There were barely anyone at God King who was his opponent. However, such a glorious expert had died in his own dwelling. Besides that, it was thanks to the assistance of God King Duanmu that his way of the sword could reach sword spirit. If it were not for the mark that God King Duanmu had left in his disciples' dwelling to pass on his laws, it would not have been so easy for him to reach sword spirit. I never thought that the third stone hut would actually be where God King Duanmu passed away. Master Chanlong sighed gently as he stared at the lifeless God King before him with mixed feelings. His voice was filled with pity. God King Duanmu is extremely powerful. Probably only those who have been ranked on the God King's throne can defeat him, and it's only defeating him. God King Duanmu has the laws of space, so if he wants to flee, he'll be even faster than the laws of wind. Killing him is almost impossible. God King Duanmu is so powerful, so I wonder who killed him? Was it a supreme expert from the top rankings of the God King's throne? Or was it a primordial realm expert? If it was a primordial realm expert, God King Duanmu would indeed struggle to escape. What a pity, what a pity. If God King Duanmu did not die, there was an extremely great chance of him reaching the primordial realm and standing at the very top of the world, only beneath the heavens. A few over-gods sighed in amazement as their gazes towards God King Duanmu were filled with admiration. This was the admiration for someone powerful. Even though God King Duanmu was already dead, the glory he had left behind still affected them. There seems to be words beside God King Duanmu, an over-god said suddenly. Everyone looked over. Indeed, there were words carved on the ground. Since you are able to make it here, you are fated to make it here. You must swear to the world that after you obtain this king's legacy and become accomplished in cultivation that you personally slay Huayan, a vice leader of the Empyrean demon cult, the expressions of all the overgods changed after they read these words. All of their faces had even become filled with fear when they saw the words Empyrean Demon Cult, and it was like they feared and dreaded the Empyrean Demon Cult dearly. Chapter 1752. A foot planted in the primordial realm. Jian Chen also became doubtful inside when he saw all their expressions. Although he had never heard of the Empyrean Demon Cult before, he could tell from their reactions that it was probably a powerful organization. For a moment, the surroundings descended into a strange silence. All the overgods stared at the words before God King Duanmu, and the light in their eyes flickered uneasily. Further away were some gods. They had entered the place before the overgods, but they had been forced far away ever since the overgods entered because they were only gods. They did not dare to get any closer. A long while later, an overgod finally sighed gently. I never thought that God King Duanmu had actually died to the hands of the vice leader of the Empyrean Demon Cult, Huayan, and that you'd have to swear to the world to become enemies with him in the future to inherit God King Duanmu's legacy. Another overgod also shook his head and said gently, with that being the case, obtaining God King Duanmu's legacy will lead to the Empyrean Demon Cult hunting you down. Is there still anyone who wants the legacy? I'd rather turn down the legacy than become enemies with the Empyrean Demon Cult because it will only lead to death. The Empyrean Demon Cult is just too terrifying. We cannot afford to offend them. The overgods all sighed regretfully. All of them feared the Empyrean Demon Cult dearly, which prevented them from accepting God King Duanmu's legacy. Can you only obtain God King Duanmu's legacy by becoming enemies with the Empyrean Demon Cult? God King Duanmu is dead, yet we can't even obtain a legacy from someone who's no longer alive even with our strength? An energetic voice rang out. The speaker was a middle-aged man in red robes. Clearly, he wanted to break the rules that God King Duanmu had set down before he had died and forcefully take the legacy. Uncertainty immediately flickered through the eyes of many overgods when they heard that. Clearly, they were wavering. I do in fact admire God King Duanmu, except the rules he set are just too tough. Basically, no one would accept them. Why leave the legacy here when we can take it out with us and allow your glory to continue within the saints' world? You never know, there really might be a day when we can avenge you, said an old man. With that, he took out a low-quality saint artifact from his space ring. He bowed politely towards God King Duanmu's corpse and said with a gruff voice, "Apologies, God King Duanmu." With that, he sent the flying sword out. Swish! The flying sword turned into a silver streak of light that flew directly towards God King Duanmu's corpse. The eyes of all the overgods present shone brightly. They stared at the flying sword as they gathered their power secretly in the meantime. Once they confirmed there were no dangers, they would charge over as quickly as possible. The flying sword moved extremely quickly, reaching 3 meters away from God King Duanmu in a single instance. However, at this moment, the terrifying power of laws suddenly appeared, enveloping God King Duanmu's corpse as a huge light screen. When the flying sword collided with the power of laws, it was reduced to dust silently. At the same time, God King Duanmu's corpse faded under the power of laws. His corpse also underwent a drastic change at that moment. The green-robed, middle-aged man vanished and a white, seated skeleton replaced it. The skeleton had a space ring on its finger, and there was a bead the size of a pigeon's egg in its head. It shone with a faint, golden light. God King Duanmu had already been dead for several 100,000 years, so his flesh had already rotted away. He only used a technique before his death to maintain his image. Once the technique was removed, his true remains would naturally be exposed. The power of laws that had suddenly appeared clearly destroyed God King Duanmu's image. It's a golden core of laws. It's a golden core of laws. The expressions of all the overgods changed the moment they saw the bead. They cried out uncontrollably as they were now extremely shocked. No one paid any attention to the space ring, as they had been expecting it. It said that once you comprehend the laws of the world to an extremely profound level, you will be able to condense a golden core of laws. At the same time, the golden core of laws represents a primordial realm expert. I never thought that God King Duanmu would have actually condensed a golden core of laws. Doesn't that mean he broke through God King and reached the primordial realm? Some of the overgods said. They were unable to remain composed. No. God King Duanmu's golden core of laws is rather different. It said that a primordial realm expert's golden core of laws shines with extremely bright light, while God King Duanmu's golden core of laws is dull and without the luster of gold. He was clearly in the process of going from God King to the primordial realm. He only had a foot planted in the primordial realm while the other foot was still planted at God King, said Yang Kai. All the overgods were perturbed. None of them had thought that God King Duanmu already had a foot planted in the primordial realm. He just needed to overcome this transition. When his golden core of laws had been completely condensed, he would become a true primordial realm expert. However, everyone soon became deeply attracted by God King Duanmu's legacy once again. They all began to attack the power of laws that protected God King Duanmu's remains. It did not matter if he had a foot planted in the primordial realm. He was already dead, reduced to a skeleton. The power of laws was very powerful, and it was enough to turn a low-quality saint artifact to dust in a single moment. However, as long as they did not approach the power of laws, it would not be able to harm them, so they could tell that the power of laws only acted as protection and could not actively attack them. The overgods all stood far away as they sent sword chi or beams of energy towards the power of laws. They wanted to waste it away bit by bit. For a while, terrifying shockwaves of energy rolled through the surroundings as booms constantly rang out. The overgods did not hold back as they attempted to smash through the protective power of laws. Fairy Haoyu, is there what you need here? Jian Shen did not attack the power of laws and spoke to Fairy Haoyu instead. I never thought that Duanmu had already broken through and condensed a golden core of laws. That has me taken aback. What I need is Duanmu's space ring. As a supreme god king, it's impossible for his space ring to not contain supreme-grade divine crystals. There might even be 5-colored divine crystals. Aside from that, there's some energy that still hasn't dispersed from the remains, which will be helpful for me. Jian Shen, I need you to buy time for me so that I can approach his remains, replied Fairy Haoyu. At this moment, there was a flash of golden light. It pierced through the forehead of an overgod instantly, killing the early overgod on the spot. The golden streak of light continued towards a second early overgod after killing the first one. However, the death of the first early overgod had already made everyone cautious. The second overgod immediately roared out, and the power of laws surged from him. He directly swung his axe towards the golden streak of light. Boom! The early overgod immediately vomited blood and was blown backwards while the golden streak of light had stopped as well. It was actually a flying sword that glimmered with golden light. Chapter 1753, Opportunity. All the overgods who attacked the power of laws that protected God King Duanmu stopped. They stared at the hovering golden sword sharply as they became rather stern. Just a single flying sword had claimed the life of an early overgod, and it had even knocked back a second overgod, causing the overgod to vomit blood. Even the late overgods slightly feared such strength. More importantly, they had not sensed where the flying sword had come from at all. Jian Shen stared at the flying sword and frowned. He became suspicious and thought, why does that flying sword seem so familiar? Who is launching sneak attacks? Please show yourself, Yang Kai called out. Humph, what sneak attack? That sounds horrible. Bao Bao is killing you out in the open, a rather childish voice rang out. The voice stunned all the overgods. They collectively turned around and stared at the golden flying sword in surprise. Clearly, the voice had come from the sword. It was also at this moment that a young girl suddenly appeared above the sword. She seemed only 4 or 5 years old. Her skin was white, and she was extremely cute. However, she was currently glaring at the overgods furiously. It's actually a sword spirit. Is this sword God King Duanmu's treasure? Bing Lu said with some surprise. Jian Chen came to a realization as well. The reason why he found the sword to be rather familiar was because it was the sword God King Duanmu wielded. You do have some insight. Correct, God King Duanmu is Baobao's master. Since you're unwilling to follow his rules, you obviously lose the right to master's legacy. Please leave immediately. Baobao will never show any mercy to anyone who disturbs master's slumber. Baobao will kill them all, the sword spirit said coldly. Although she did not seem old, her childish voice was filled with killing intent. Clearly, the sword had followed God King Duanmu for countless years. It had gone through battles everywhere with him and had grown with him. Ha ha ha, a flying sword is actually threatening us. This is just hilarious, a late overgod sneered before directly charging towards the golden sword. He grabbed the handle, attempting to subdue the sword. The other overgods moved at that moment as well. They all charged towards the flying sword. It was God King Duanmu's treasure, so to them, it was something that could watch over and protect their entire clan. Jian Chen, it's extremely likely that God King Duanmu's legacy is related to the flying sword. It might even lie in the artifact spirit's hand. If you want it, I can help you obtain it once I recover my body, said Fairy Haoyu. Fairy Haoyu, that's not a priority. Let's think about how we can get you close to God King Duanmu's remains instead, said Jian Chen. He did not become interested at all. He had come to God King Duanmu's dwelling this time mainly because of Fairy Haoyu as well as to find some treasures for his cultivation so that he could break through with the chaotic body as soon as possible. God King Duanmu's legacy was just some cultivation methods and battle skills. For cultivation methods, he had the chaotic body. Let alone God King Duanmu's cultivation method, but even the cultivation method of a few primordial realm experts would not interest him. For battle skills, he had the ones from the artifact spirit. Many of the battle skills were created by the old master of the sword spirits. He had even grasped the god-tier sword technique, the profound sword chi. He naturally felt no interest towards a god king's sword techniques. Several dozen overgods began fighting against the golden sword on the other side. Not all the overgods had taken part in this battle, but close to 30 people were now involved in a fierce struggle. After all, the sword spirit controlled the flying sword. She had no need to fear anyone present if she fought against them individually, but she could only flee when up against close to 30 overgods. The sword turned into a streak of light as it flitted about, dodging everyone's attacks and only fighting back once in a while. However, those with insight could tell with a single glance that the flying sword had completely lost the upper hand. It completely relied on its speed to dodge and weave between the overgods. The shockwaves from their fighting are too intense. I won't be able to endure it just as a soul, so you have to find a way to stop them from fighting. Only then can I come out, Fairy Haoyu said grimly. But there's a powerful barrier of laws around God King Duanmu's remains. How will you get past that? Jian Chen asked with a frown. I'll pay a price and temporarily suppress the power. However, I'll need half a minute. Jian Chen became stern when he heard that. He knew that Fairy Haoyu wanted him to buy half a minute for her. During this time, she could not afford to suffer any injuries at all. After all, she was just too fragile as a soul. Even an origin realm expert could heavily wound her, let alone overgods. Although half a minute was short, he had to endure the attacks of all the overgods. Not a single overgod present would let Fairy Haoyu approach God King Duanmu's remains. Jian Chen looked around and discovered that there were over a dozen overgods who did not take part in the fight against the flying sword. At the same time, extremely terrifying pulses of energy were emitted from the battle between the sword and the overgods. Even the gods struggled to gain their footing, so it was inconvenient for Fairy Haoyu's soul to move around under these circumstances. At this moment, the flying sword turned into a golden streak of light and vanished from the space in a single instance. It had fled outside. Clearly, it was not the opponent of close to 30 overgods. The overgods did not give up. They all pursued it. The power of laws protected God King Duanmu's remains anyway, so no one could enter. As a result, they did not worry about someone taking away God King Duanmu's space ring in the meantime at all. In the blink of an eye, only Jian Chen and the other overgods who did not take part in the fight remained. A few of them were early overgods and knew that before mid or even late overgods, it would be very difficult for them to obtain the flying sword. As a result, they saved their strength and accumulated power instead, preparing for one last fight. This is a great opportunity. Jian Chen's eyes lit up. He knew that an opportunity had presented itself. However, he did not move immediately. Instead, he said to the overgods of the divine kingdom of Pingtian, Guhan Shui, Bing Lu, Feng Buell, there's something I want to discuss with you. Guhan Shui, Bing Lu, and Feng Buell were all early overgods, so they did not take part in the battle for the flying sword. Chapter 1754. How use might Guhan Shui, Bing Lu, and Feng Buell all looked towards the seated Jian Chen when they heard his voice. Jian Chen, what do you have to discuss with us? Feel free to go ahead, the hunchbacked Bing Lu smiled. Jian Chen, what is it? Is it good or bad? If it's something good, you can't forget about me, Guhan Shui giggled. She spoke like Jian Chen was an old friend of hers. Jian Chen, feel free to mention it. If it's within our abilities, we will definitely assist you, Feng Buell also replied. No one else knew about their conversation, but Bing Lu, Guhan Shui, and Feng Buell all treated Jian Chen rather politely. They were extremely friendly, unwilling to give up any opportunity. Jian Chen's cultivation was a great weakness in their eyes, so if he really started fighting, it would be impossible for him to defeat an early overgod with just the laws of the sword at overgod. However, they knew even more that as long as Jian Chen had some time, he would be able to cultivate his way up. Once he reached the same level of cultivation as his comprehension, there would barely be anyone who was his opponent at the same level thanks to the strength of the laws of the sword. He might even become a second Ling Ho Gong, using his laws of the sword to reach a stalemate against a mid-overgod as an early overgod. If Jian Chen's terrifying sword chi that could kill early overgods instantly was considered, there would probably be no mid-overgods that were Jian Chen's opponent. The three overgods would naturally try to get as close to an expert like that as possible. They spoke to him as if even if they could not befriend him, they wanted to avoid becoming enemies. After a while of silence, Jian Chen replied secretly, Bing Lu, Guhan Shui, Feng Buell, I hope that you can assist me by keeping three early overgods busy to the best of your abilities. Jian Chen had asked the three of them because he trusted them the most out of the overgods present. Although a few of the other overgods did want to befriend him, he simply did not trust him, even if there were a few from the royal city of the divine kingdom of Pingtian. Jian Chen did not dare to ask Yang Kai even more so, as he was a late overgod. He was just too powerful, so Jian Chen could not afford to trust him. Keep three early overgods busy? Jian Chen, what are you trying to do? Guhan Shui asked in surprise. You will naturally understand in detail later. What is important is that it's extremely likely for the overgods to attack me. I only need you to keep three overgods busy for half a minute. As remuneration, I will give you a soul recovery pill each, said Jian Chen. What? A soul recovery pill? The three overgods were all startled when they heard that. They became filled with disbelief. Soul recovery pills were extremely valuable. Only a single pill was needed for an early overgod to recover all of their power of the soul in a few seconds. It was extremely valuable, to the point where it could not be purchased in the divine kingdom of Pingtian. Aside from the soul recovery pill, I'll give you each 2 droplets of liquid lime, and I'll owe you a personal favor. All you need to do is keep 3 early overgods busy for half a minute, said Jian Chen. He did not hold back at all to allow Fairy Hao Yu to approach God King Duanmu's remains. Alright, we'll agree. We'll keep 3 overgods busy for half a minute, but we'll be helpless against the other overgods. After a moment of hesitation, Bing Lu, Feng Buell, and Guhan Shui all agreed. Although they could vaguely sense that Jian Chen wanted to lay his hands on God King Duanmu's remains, they did not really care. They knew that it was impossible for them to obtain God King Duanmu's space ring and his legacy. Even if they managed to stop Jian Chen, the objects would still end up in the hands of a late overgod. With their strength at early overgod, it was very difficult for them to benefit at all. If that were the case, they would be better off agreeing to Jian Chen. Not only could they improve their relationship with him, but they could also benefit from him. Of course, what they truly valued was the favor that Jian Chen owed them. Jian Chen was extremely frank as well. He gave the three of them the soul recovery pills and the droplets of liquid lime on the spot. Jian Chen only had 10 soul recovery pills in total. He had given Ando Fu and Mo Ling 1 each and split the remaining pills between him and Shenjian, so he and Shenjian both got 4 each. He had already consumed 2 of the 4 pills earlier, so he only possessed 2 pills on him. As a result, he had taken 2 pills from Shenjian out of the 3 he had given to the 3 overgods. He kept 1 last pill on him just in case. Jian Chen could utilize the pills he had given away better by consuming them himself, allowing him to kill 6 early overgods in total. However, he needed a period of time to recover the power of the soul after consuming a pill. Jian Chen definitely would not have the time to recover in the upcoming battle. As a result, he needed the 3 overgods to keep 3 other overgods busy so that the pressure on him would be reduced. The only thing he possessed that would interest overgods were the pills. Although the other pills on him were valuable, they were nothing to overgods. Jian Chen had paid quite the price for Fairy Haoyu to be able to condense her body. So what if you've lost a few soul recovery pills? Once Fairy Haoyu gets through successfully and obtains God King Duanmu's space ring, I'll be paid back by countless folds. My chaotic body might be able to break through successfully as well, thought Jian Chen as he comforted himself. The overgods who chased the golden flying sword could return at any time, so Jian Chen did not dare to waste any time. Immediately, he let out the bright moon divine hall from his space ring. As the doors swung open, Fairy Haoyu slowly emerged in the form of a soul. Shenjian also came out. The other overgods nearby naturally noticed Jian Chen's actions. None of them behaved carelessly. Jian Chen immediately put away the bright moon divine hall as well. However, the moment he put it away, Fairy Haoyu suddenly became a blur that directly charged for the power of laws around God King Duanmu. A mere soul desires God King Duanmu's possession. What a joke! Aside from Guhan Shui, Feng Buell, and Bing Lu, all the other overgods sneered scornfully. However, what happened next made their mouths drop. When Fairy Haoyu approached the screen of power, she was not directly destroyed as they had expected. Her illusionary body began to shine extraordinarily bright at that moment. The light seemed to be a layer of white flames that burned away at her soul, causing her soul to dull at a visible rate. On the other hand, her soul slowly fused into the power of laws under the burning light. All the power that came in contact with her body shuddered gently before slowly moving away as if it was afraid of coming in contact with her. The shudder was only what people on the outside saw. In reality, the layer of power trembled in fear. At that moment, none of the overgods had sensed that an unimaginably terrifying pressure had appeared from Fairy Haoyu. It was just that Fairy Haoyu had used the pressure with great skill, so it all surged towards the power of laws. The pressure seemed to be the might of the heavens. It had completely surpassed the power of laws, causing the power there to shy away. Of course, Fairy Haoyu had also paid an unimaginable price to use this terrifying pressure. Her soul was being burned away, becoming weaker and weaker. Chapter 1755. An intense battle. Not only did the overgods present all become stunned as they watched Fairy Haoyu slowly merge into the power of laws, but even the eyes of Guhan Shui, Bing Lu, and Feng Buell narrowed. Disbelief filled their faces. The layer of power that protected God King Duanmu's remains were the laws of someone who had a foot planted in the primordial realm. Even though it could not attack actively and could only protect the remains, this did not mean it was easy to approach the power. Even most god kings would become injured if they approached the power of laws, let alone over gods. This was because the power had almost surpassed the level of god king. However, now that Fairy Hao had approached it just as a soul, not only did she avoid dispersing, but she even merged into it slowly. It seemed like she was going to pass through the layer of power. Naturally, this sight shocked all the overgods present. Jian Chen, who is she? Guhan Shue's voice rang out in Jian Chen's head. Her voice was filled with shock. Who she is not important, but I can tell you that she's a supreme expert, Jian Chen replied to Bing Lu, Guhan Shue, and Feng Buell. The expressions of the three all changed when they heard that. At the same time, a pill appeared in Shenjian's hand. This pill was something he obtained from the dwelling of God King Duanmu's disciple. It was known as a fire cloud pill. It could temporarily raise the consumer's cultivation by a minor level, ignoring the laws of the world. However, the price of consuming it was extremely great. No one would be willing to ingest the pill unless it was a life or death situation. Shenjian consumed the fire cloud pill without any hesitation. A powerful presence immediately began to radiate from Shenjian as soon as the pill reached Shenjian's stomach, and his cultivation rapidly soared at that moment as well. It went from early god to mid-god. A fire cloud pill appeared in Jian Chen's hand as well. He thought, I hope the fire cloud pill is effective on chaotic force as well. Jian Chen consumed the fire cloud pill without any hesitation as well. At that moment, he felt like his chaotic force go on a rampage. Although his chaotic force had not reached the level of the 10th layer, Jian Chen could clearly sense that it flowed even more violently than before. It felt like it had gone berserk, and it was clearly more powerful than before. Fire cloud pills were good things, but the price to consume them was just too heavy, so he did not give the pill to Guhan Shue, Bing Lu, or Feng Buell. Even if he did give it to them, they would not consume it at a time like this. Oh no, the soul is trying to steal God King Duanmu's things. Stop her. We can't let her succeed. Just as Shenjian and Jian Chen consumed the fire cloud pill, the overgods all responded. Hostility poured from their eyes as they charged towards Fairy Hao without any hesitation. Two people swung their hands and sent a beam of powerful origin energy towards Fairy Hao. Bing Lu, Guhan Shue, Feng Buell, move quickly. You'll be assisting a peak expert. Once the peak expert rebuilds her body, you'll definitely benefit as well, Jian Chen said to Bing Lu, Guhan Shue, and Feng Buell hurriedly before arriving before Fairy Hao in a flash. He used his body as a shield to protect Fairy Hao. At the same time, the flying snow sword appeared in his hand. He radiated with surging sword intent as he used his complete comprehension of the laws of the sword. He sent out two powerful strands of sword chi to disperse the incoming origin energy. Boom! The sword chi and origin energy collided and erupted with a powerful shockwave of energy. Jian Chen's feet seemed to be rooted to the ground as he stood there like a mountain. His body had become a tough shield. The energy all struck Jian Chen's body. It had completely failed to reach the Fairy Hao behind him. At the same time, Bing Lu, Guhan Shue, and Feng Buell moved as well. They charged towards the overgods with gritted teeth and kept three of them busy. Aside from Jian Chen, there were a total of 14 overgods gathered there. Feng Buell, Bing Lu, and Guhan Shue kept 3 overgods busy in total, so there were 8 remaining. The 8 overgods all charged towards Jian Chen at that moment. All of them surged with aggression and hostility. Even though they feared Jian Chen slightly, they had completely forgotten about it with God King Duanmu's legacy presented before them. A will that splits the heavens, the sword shakes and stars shatter. Shenjian roared out and his cloudstream sword emitted a pulse that quickly expanded towards 2 of the overgods. Shenjian's laws of the sword had reached the great perfection of sword origin, equivalent to peak god. His cultivation had increased from the fire cloud pill as well, going from early god to mid god. Moreover, the laws of the sword were one of the laws with the greatest offensive power, so his sword technique was enough to kill regular late gods. Even if it were not enough to threaten early overgods, they needed to face it seriously. Aside from Ling Ho Gong, the other overgods all comprehended laws that were weaker than the laws of the sword in terms of power. Ling Ho Gong possessed the power to challenge those stronger than him with his laws of the sword. He was able to reach a stalemate against a mid-overgod as an early overgod, so there was no need to mention the current Xinjian. The faces of the two early overgod turned cold when they saw Xinjian's attack. The pulse did not pose any threat to them, and it only forced them to face it seriously. A mere god dares to challenge overgods? Your bravery is praiseworthy, but you're just looking to die, the two early overgods sneered. One of them directly launched a palm strike in origin energy and the power of laws surged forth, dismantling Xinjian's ripple. Soon afterwards, the two overgods changed in direction. They no longer charged towards Jianchen. Their gazes were cold as they charged towards Xinjian with killing intent. Xinjian became extremely grim. Without a doubt, it was a huge challenge for him to fight two overgods with his current strength. Fortunately, he only needed to last half a minute. A will that splits the heavens, the sword extends and galaxies extinguish. Suddenly, Xinjian roared out and specks of light suddenly began to glimmer around him. It transformed into an illusionary galaxy, radiating with grandeur. His entire body seemed to have fused with the galaxy, becoming the god in the illusionary starry sky. As he stabbed out with his cloudstream sword, the enormous force of the galaxy immediately surged out towards the two overgods with a tremendous and ancient presence. The two early overgods became rather stern as they faced this force. At that moment, the two of them could actually sense a sliver of threat from it, which shocked them very much. They were only facing a god after all. On the other side, Jianchen stood with the flying snow sword while a damaged piece of armor had already appeared on him. He had obtained this armor from the sea realm. In reality, it was a god artifact of rather high quality, except it was just too damaged, so it was almost completely worthless. However, Jianchen could no longer care about whether the armor would be useful or not now that he had to keep 6 early overgods busy for half a minute. He had equipped it. Chapter 1756, Brutality. Jianchen, don't you dare try to take God King Duanmu's legacy for yourself. Jianchen, move or today will be your last day alive. The 6 early overgods who charged towards Jianchen yelled out aggressively. Before they even arrived, they had sent streams of energy towards Jianchen. Jianchen had equipped the damaged armor, which protected less than a third of his body. His white robes and hair ruffled despite the absence of wind. At the same time, a shocking sword intent radiated from his body. The sword intent was so powerful that the 6 incoming overgods all became stern. Sky-severing strike. Jianchen bellowed out. He lifted the flying snow sword above his head and a stream of light that was 300 meters in length immediately condensed. With a sky full of snow, the huge sword chi directly cleaved down. As it fell, the surrounding space seemed to freeze, forming a sword domain. It enveloped the attacks from the 6 overgods. Boom! The collision between the sword chi and the attacks resulted in a huge boom. They dispersed at the same time, causing terrifying energy and fragments of sword chi to splay into the surroundings. Jianchen's body trembled, and he seemed to pale slightly. His inner organs surged like the ocean. However, he remained still, forming a tough shield as he stood there firmly. He blocked the incoming energy to protect Fairy Hao Yu. At the same time, 2 strands of profound sword chi appeared above his head. It shone with dazzling light and surged with sword chi, giving off a terrifying pressure. The expressions of the 6 overgods around Jianchen immediately changed as soon as the profound sword chi had appeared. A smear of dread and deep fear appeared in their eyes. They had personally witnessed the might of the profound sword chi. It could easily claim the lives of early overgods. Back off if you don't want to die, or I'll have to kill you mercilessly, Jian Chen called out. His presence surged as he held off multiple enemies by himself. 6 seconds had passed by now. The 6 overgods looked at each other as they became hesitant. What are we afraid of? We're 6 people. Even if his secret technique is powerful, I refuse to believe that we can't stop it when the 6 of us work together. Let's get him. Finally, the 6 overgods stopped hesitating after one of them called out. They encircled Jian Chen and shot towards him rapidly. A cold light flickered through Jian Chen's eyes. With a thought, one strand of profound sword chi above his head immediately shot out as a streak of white light towards one of the overgods. The moment the profound sword chi shot out, the 6 overgods stopped. They all struck out to stop the profound sword chi. Origin energy pulsed around them wildly as their power of laws condensed into sharp swords that shot towards the profound sword chi. However, the profound sword chi simply moved too quickly, and it basically exceeded their reaction speed. Even though they had moved very quickly, they were still much slower compared to the profound sword chi. Before their attacks came in contact with the profound sword chi, the sword chi had already neared the forehead of an overgod. Spurt. Blood was tossed into the air as a bloody mark appeared on the forehead of one of the overgods. The profound sword chi had pierced his forehead without any obstructions and wiped out his soul. The attacks from the 5 other overgods that aimed to stop the profound sword chi missed and struck Jian Chen instead. Jian Chen's body shuddered. Blood leaked from the corner of his mouth as 4 terrifying gashes appeared on his body. His blood dyed his white robes red. The 5th attack had landed on the damaged piece of armor. The armor was a god artifact after all. Even after becoming so damaged, it was still extremely tough. The overgod's attack did not leave behind a single mark, but the force was still dispersed through Jian Chen's body. Jian Chen finally took a step back helplessly. However, the force pushing him back was just too powerful, so he clearly did not manage to disperse it all from just that single step. When he wanted to take another step back, he gritted his teeth firmly and planted his flying snow sword into the ground, forcefully stopping himself. However, just something like that worsened his condition, making him spurt blood from his mouth. He could not afford to take another step back. If he did, he could come in contact with Fairy Hao Yu's soul. Jian Chen wiped away the blood from the corner of his mouth. Even though he was heavily injured, he did not show any weakness on his face at all. With a flip of his hand, he took out a 7th grade truth tear healing pill that he had obtained from the pill room as well as a soul recovery pill. He ingested both. As the pills reached his stomach, his wounds immediately began to heal rapidly. The power of his soul that he had consumed to use a strand of profound sword chi quickly recovered as well as the soul recovery pill melted away. At the same time, Jian Chen circulated his chaotic force wildly. He completely used the chaotic force to his advantage, taking advantage of all the time he could get to heal. Jian Chen's wounds healed at an extremely astonishing rate from the chaotic force and pill. If any of the overgods present had seen it, they would have been completely astounded. 15 seconds had passed now. The firmament of the sea. At this moment, a bellow rang out. One of the 5 overgods began to use a truth tier battle skill. Behind him, a vast ocean appeared. It fused with the surroundings as it moved all the energy in the surroundings, enveloping Jian Chen. Fire God's Finger. Another overgod used a battle skill. Flames surged around him as a massive finger condensed and extended towards Jian Chen. Absolute Darkness. Palm of Destruction. Death's soul-severing slash. The 5 overgods all used truth tier battle skills. Terrifying pressure permeated the surroundings as 5 extremely terrifying powers tore through the surroundings and rolled towards Jian Chen devastatingly. Jian Chen had never felt so grim before. With a thought, he sent out the 2nd strand of profound sword chi to fend off the 5 battle skills. The profound sword chi turned into a streak of light and collided with the 1st sword chi in a single moment. With a boom, the first battle skill collapsed without being able to put up any resistance at all. The profound sword chi continued towards the second, third, fourth, and fifth battle skills. Boom! 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 Along with a string of rumbles, the profound sword chi destroyed the battle skills from the 5 overgods. The profound sword chi did not disperse yet either. It flickered as it directly shot towards one of the overgods like a brave warrior. The overgod became extremely stern. He immediately bellowed out as energy surged from his body. He swung his sickle towards the profound sword chi with his power of laws. He had put his life on the line with that attack. Chapter 1757. Half a minute after tearing through the 5 battle skills from the overgods, the profound sword chi had weakened greatly. It was nowhere near as powerful as it was at the beginning. In the end, it shattered under the slash from the sickle. However, due to the momentum of the attack, the scattered sword chi continued in the same direction towards the early overgod that wielded a sickle. Caught off guard, the early overgod was struck by the shattered sword chi. Every single strand of the residual sword chi pierced his body easily, creating many holes. The power from the laws of the sword constantly gnawed away at him around his wounds, causing his condition to worsen. The overgod grunted and left the battle with his sickle. He was heavily injured and incapacitated. Jian Chen's power of the soul was completely drained after sending out the 2 strands of sword chi. He felt waves of dizziness descend upon him. However, as the soul recovery pill came into play, the power of his soul immediately began to replenish rapidly. 21 seconds had passed by now. Kill him. The 4 other overgods all went crazy. They basically charged towards Jian Chen with bloodshot eyes, as they could already see that most of Fairy Haoyu had already merged into the power of laws that protected God King Duanmu's remains. The dizziness in Jian Chen's head receded swiftly, and he felt his head clear up again. Even though the power of his soul had replenished, he was clearly unable to use a 3rd strand of profound sword chi with just the few seconds that had passed. Daluo sword! Jian Chen bellowed out. He formed a seal with one hand, and the flying snow sword immediately shone with a golden light. A golden sword chi condensed around the flying snow sword. As he swung the sword, the golden sword chi shot out with a swish, colliding with the sword in one of the overgod's hands. As the Daluo sword chi dispersed, the early overgod who had received the attack came to a halt as well. He staggered a few steps backwards helplessly. However, the 3 other overgods had all arrived before Jian Chen now. One of them used a huge hammer to strike towards Jian Chen's chest, while the other 2 both used swords. They stabbed out simultaneously with the laws of fire and the laws of darkness. The stab with the laws of fire extended towards Jian Chen while the attack with the laws of darkness went around Jian Chen and headed directly towards the Fairy Haoyu behind him. Jian Chen's eyes narrowed when he saw the attack that headed towards Fairy Haoyu. Then he roared out, and his eyes shone shockingly. Red light vaguely appeared in his pupils. This was the sign of him about to lose his mind. His main mission was to protect Fairy Haoyu for half a minute. No matter how dangerous it was, he could not dodge during this period of time, nor could he retreat. He had to face the attacks head-on. The sword was already stabbed towards Fairy Haoyu, so she was in danger now. Jian Chen extended his left hand in that crucial moment. Chaotic force and silver-white light enveloped his hand. He directly grabbed the sword with his hand. At the same time, he placed the flying snow sword across his body to block the hammer that traveled towards his chest. Spurt. The sword with the laws of fire had already stabbed into Jian Chen, piercing him all the way through. The tip of the sword dripped with the blood of his chaotic body. Each droplet of blood possessed a lot of power. It could even kill weaker receival experts. The hand that Jian Chen had used to grab the sword became bloodied as well. His flesh and skin had been destroyed, revealing white bone. Fortunately, Jian Chen had managed to grab the sword tightly, preventing it from reaching Fairy Haoyu. His body stood before Fairy Haoyu like a tough shield, blocking all the shockwaves of energy. 24 seconds had passed now. At this moment, the three overgods had already approached Jian Chen. None of them were weaker than Jian Chen, yet he now had to face the three of them at the same time. He was struggling to stop them, yet he also had to protect Fairy Haoyu. The red light in Jian Chen's eyes became more and more intense while the world in Jian Chen's eyes gradually reddened. Jian Chen knew that he was losing his mind, but he could do nothing about it right now. Seeing how Fairy Haoyu had almost merged into the power of laws, determination suddenly flooded his eyes, and he called out, "Explode flying snow sword." With a deafening boom, the flying snow sword exploded with dazzling white light. The explosion contained the laws of the sword and strands of chaotic force. Immediately, a terrifying energy expanded with the laws of the sword and chaotic force, and it pushed back the three early overgods. Jian Chen removed the spear he had obtained from killing the skinny overgod earlier at this moment. He held it in one hand and drove the tip deeply into the ground, using it to stabilize himself. As Jian Chen clung onto the spear, he remained on the spot as he endured the storm-like barrage from the explosion of the flying snow sword. He did not take a single step back, but he paid a great price as a result. His wounds became even worse and blood spurted from his mouth time and time again. He had become sheet white now. 27 seconds had passed now. The three early overgods stabilized themselves very soon. Before the shockwaves of energy had dispersed, they charged through the energy and headed towards Jian Chen again. Jian Chen glared at the three. At this moment, he could feel his consciousness fade slightly while the world before him had gradually become filled with red. In the last 3 seconds, the bloodied Jian Chen suddenly charged towards the three early overgods. He stretched out his hands and grabbed the swords from the two overgods and used the damaged armor to forcefully endure the attack from the hammer. Boom! The hammer blew Jian Chen far away. As he flew backwards, he vomited multiple times. His wounds were horrendous. Quick, kill the soul. After blowing Jian Chen away, the three overgods immediately charged towards Fairy Haoyu. Their gazes were icy. However, it was also at this time that Fairy Haoyu's illusionary soul merged into the power of laws completely. She vanished from the overgod's vision. Only a cold voice that was filled with killing intent rang out. "If you dare kill the two of them, I'll wipe out your entire clan once I recover my strength. Even if you flee to the ends of the earth, I'll take your lives. Even the God King of your divine kingdom won't be able to protect you." The expressions of the three early overgods changed when they heard that. Even God Kings would not be able to protect them. Was the soul a supreme God King in the past? Or even beyond God King? Shenjian collapsed on the ground on the other side, bloodied and wounded. Although the two overgods he fought did not suffer any significant wounds, they seemed to be in a rather horrible condition. Shenjian's sword chi had ripped their clothes. You're tuning into the Biyao's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.